Hello everyone and welcome to a very long video. This video is all about Assassin's Creed, the infamous and famous Ubisoft franchise that's been going since the mid to late 2000s. And I cover every single mainline Assassin's Creed game in this video review up until 2019, which is current year, because of course there's going to be more, and those will obviously not be in this video because of the time this video came out. But here it is, every single Assassin's Creed game that I have reviewed on this channel, all put together in one nice little video for everyone to see. It's also a very long video, but I will put timestamps in the description if you want to specifically watch a certain game. Otherwise, it's all of them. So, thank you for watching in advance. Here's all the videos. So here we are with the original Assassin's Creed. It's pretty hard to believe it's been out this long. The original Assassin's Creed came out in 2007 and was basically a more mature evolution of Prince of Persia. The game would go on to inspire a huge franchise that is easily one of the most recognizable franchises in the last 12 or so years. So Assassin's Creed, the original anyway, has two plots to it, and let's get into them. One plot is in modern day, or at least 2007, and the other one is set in the Third Crusade. Okay, yeah, I guess it's modern day compared to the Third Crusade. So the modern story has you take control of Desmond Miles. Now, Desmond Miles, he wakes up in a strange place. He's apparently been like kidnapped or something by these scientists and is part of this Assassin's Creed or Brotherhood or group, or he formerly was, but still has some connection to them. Well, the two scientists tell him that he has to lie down on this contraption known as the Animus. This contraption allows Desmond Miles to relive his ancestors' past. See, Desmond Miles comes from a long line of assassins in this so-called creed, and they're all his ancestors. So he's made to relive his ancestor Altair's past. In it, these scientists will find really important information or something that is quite vague to Desmond Miles. Now, Altair's story has him in the Assassin's Creed. He is a top-ranking assassin and is tasked with getting an invaluable object from the assassin's greatest enemies, the Templars. These are the main antagonists of the Assassin's Creed series and are very prevalent the entire series. Well, he fails to get this object from him. The leader of the assassins berates him and actually strips him of his rank. If he wants to get his rank back, he needs to kill these 9 special targets given to him by said master. Now, it's pretty clear which story sounds more exciting, and that's Altair's. His is far more interesting and has a lot more progression throughout it, in addition to some pretty good twists and turns. The modern stuff is just borderline confusing, downright cryptic in other aspects. It just sort of comes out of nowhere and is a huge contrast to the story of Altair. Desmond Miles is just such a bland character. We're not really given any information about him. We're not really given any reason at all to care about him, even in the slightest. He's just sort of there and is along for the ride. He really just doesn't do anything. Now, don't get me wrong. Neither of these stories are amazing by any stretch of the imagination, but the story of Altair is pretty alright. Desmond's is just really inconclusive and downright boring in comparison. I know some people like the real-life stuff of Assassin's Creed or the modern day whatever, but I'm good. Altair's story, pretty good overall, but Desmond Miles is just boring. So on to the gameplay of the first Assassin's Creed. I guess I should mention what you can do as Desmond Miles. You can walk around this room and get in the Animus, and that's it. Anyway, now on to Altair. He is the real gameplay. Assassin's Creed is an open-world, third-person action-adventure with some stealth elements game. Naturally, with a title such as Assassin's Creed, you're naturally assuming you have to go around assassinating people, and you would be correct. The primary goal of the game is to carry out a series of assassinations given to you by the leader. After you are given a target, you head to whatever city that they are in and begin exploring. In every city, there is a hideout for the assassins, and here's where you get information about your target. However, it is just the base information. You'll have to explore the open world to get information about your target. However, before we get into going after the target, let's talk about what Altair can do in the game. He is a very capable protagonist in the game. He can do quite a lot. He can walk, that's important. He can run, and he can even sprint. He can do a small hop as well. The main mode of travel is running and parkouring. You will be climbing buildings and structures and jumping across them. You can scale pretty much anything in the game as long as Altair can grab onto something. You scale tons of structures and jumps. You jump all around the rooftops, rooftop to rooftop. He's very versatile, lots of parkouring. And that's just his movement. He's well equipped for combat as well. The best / coolest weapon in the game is the Hidden Blade. The Hidden Blade is just that, a blade that is under his arm in his sleeve. You just walk up to somebody with it and grab them and bam, you just kill them. Or you can tackle people and stick the blade in them, that's good too. This is my favorite weapon in the game and I try to use it as much as I can. It is completely stealthy as well, so unless someone important sees it, yeah, it's stealth. Altair has throwing knives, which are pretty self-explanatory. He can do punches as well and do basic physical damage like that. Lastly, he is the sword. He can fight with a sword, and the combat in the game is sort of like Batman Arkham, but with swords and nowhere near as good. You can swing the sword, charge it, block, counter, and grab with it. The combat is okay at best. Altair has health that slowly regenerates also. Now, Assassin's Creed has a stealth system to it. It isn't the most complex, but it has one. You have a detection meter basically. You can be hidden to the guards, or you can be on alert to where if they see you, they will go after you. You will be spotted. Like, this is Assassin's Creed. You're going to get spotted. You will get spotted. Once that happens, you got to break their line of sight. Once you break their line of sight, then you have to get into a hiding spot. This could be a pile of hay, a hidden shack thing on rooftops, but you have to break their line of sight to get this to work. Then they will lose sight of you and will pull back. Additionally, there are a couple other stealth techniques in the game, such as sitting on benches to blend in, praying with monks to blend in, etc. Altair has a lot of options when it comes to how you want to explore the world and take out targets. So let's go over how you take out your targets. After you talk to the agent at the bureau, you then have to go find tall towers and climb them. They are labeled on the map, and you need to climb to the top of these and do a world examination. After you do that, it will show all the available missions in the area. You have to do 3 recon missions for each target to get enough information to go after them. The missions include eavesdropping, interrogation, pickpocketing, and helping out fellow assassins. Eavesdropping involves you sitting on a bench and listening to a conversation about your target. Pickpocketing has you following somebody around and doing just that, pickpocketing them stealthily. Interrogation has you listen to someone spout some crap and then tell him to, you follow him to a secluded area and beat the crap out of him until he gives you the info. The other assassin missions usually involve little time trials, basically where you get from one point of the map to the other as fast as you can, or you collect flags or kill a couple targets within the time limit. These ones are much more in-depth and require a lot more time and skill, so I usually avoided these. In every map there are 6 recon missions you can do for the target, but you only need 3 done, so I usually just stuck to the eavesdrop, interrogate, and pickpocket ones. They were the quickest and the easiest. Now, once you have enough information on the target, you go back to the bureau and get ready to go after them. These are the real targets of the game. These are usually some terrible person that is doing something bad, like public executions for people who don't deserve it, burning books, or just being an all-around cocksucker. This is where most of the fun is, as these targets are definitely the most interesting to kill. They remind me of Hitman targets, however I will just say that these targets are nowhere near as good as Hitman targets. And they're usually in a generally large area, and it's up to you to figure out how you want to take them out. You could just run in there and try to fight him, or you could be stealthy and just try to sneak kill him. It's up to you, really. Now, when you aren't killing one of the targets, there are a few side objectives. There's collecting these flags throughout the cities, and there's also a few side missions like killing some other bad Templars or rescuing people from the city guard. But I don't actually know if these get you anything, as it seems like it's just for completionists. I gotta say, the most fun I had in the game was probably just parkouring around on the buildings, running from guards after I just killed a target. Running from the guards is pretty exhilarating and fun for the most part, and the game starts adding more guards the further you get in it, and it starts to get actually decently difficult. And that's the general gameplay of the first Assassin's Creed, is explore the open world, get information, take out your target, be stealthy or not, it's up to you. So on to the presentation. This game actually looks really good for the time. This game came out in 2007, and I think actually it stands the test of time for aging. I think it's aged quite well in the graphics department. I think compared to games like Mass Effect and Bioshock, which are also from 07, it stands up as one of the best. The detail is pretty nice for the time, and there aren't that many rough textures. The character models are a bit rough around the edges, but all in all, I think it still looks pretty good. The NPCs, they could look a lot better, but look decent enough. They still look generally high quality. Now Altair, though, he clearly, all the work was done here, because he looks and animates great. Not only is his character model the best in the game, but his animation is just top quality, especially for the time. Seeing him climb around, jump, and fight, it's all extremely smooth and quite impressive. It looks really good. It's just really smooth and not rigid or completely unrealistic, and it's really nice to see. Everything he does just looks really good in general. The other models, they don't animate anywhere near as good, but they're all decent. The frame rate was really good, and I never had any issues with it at all, but I do have a pretty good PC, of course, so yeah. Overall, I think the graphics are actually not too hard on the eyes, and they still look fine today. The sound in the game was actually pretty good for the most part. The music was not totally forgettable. There were a few decent tracks. I'm not going to say it was great or even very good, but it wasn't all generic crap that started to plague games around this time. It's actually some memorable stuff, which is nice. It's always a plus. The sound effects are pretty stock for the most part, though nothing really stood out. Except when you stick the blade in someone, that's just, that's good. This just leaves us with the voice acting, which I think is pretty hit or miss. Some of it is pretty good and pretty decent, sounds like they were actually trying, and some of it just sounds boring, bored, and people were just generally uninspired. Desmond Miles just sounds kind of uninspired. Despite how decent his voice acting was, I just wasn't feeling it with him. Some characters just fell flat in a few aspects, though. Altair was fine, I guess. He doesn't really talk too much, but that's just kind of the appeal. At least the accents are on point for the most part, I think, and are much appreciated. I mean, they're not perfect, of course, but they're pretty decent, the accents. It could have been a whole lot worse, and was actually pretty passable as a whole. I don't really have any complaints in the sound department, other than the music was just, at best, average. Okay, but now it's time for the part of the review where I talk about what isn't very good with the game. In Assassin's Creed 1, it really has some parts to it that I'm just going to say are not very good. The first thing I'm going to say is that the controls in this game are not perfect at all. They are really unrefined for the most part. They feel clunky to an extent and are just extremely imprecise. Sometimes it'll feel like they are just so loose, and other times they're just so tight. Like, it's really a constantly fluctuating issue. It just never really works with you 100%. Sometimes when you're platforming around, the controls just won't function correctly. Especially at tense moments. There were many instances where I meant to jump somewhere and Altair just literally didn't jump there, or didn't perform the correct action, or I somehow got stuck on the environment and couldn't do anything. It's just very unresponsive at times. Occasionally it was really frustrating when the controls just wouldn't work with you, and I'd just end up jumping to my death or something similar due to these wonky controls. It's just not perfect, and it would take many more games before it got refined. The camera also is not your best friend in some situations, not showing you enough of the environment, because it just has you climb to a dead end because it just doesn't show you enough of the environment, basically. And the controls can just be a really big pain in the ass in most of these situations, especially when you're running through them. The guards, it just doesn't cooperate, and really it just gets frustrating. It's my biggest problem with the entire game, actually. It's this lack of refinement. My next issue seems to be the most common issue with the original Assassin's Creed. Like, I can't see a single video talking about this game that doesn't bring it up, and that's how repetitive it is. It really is do 3 recon missions, go kill target for the entire game, and it never breaks this trend once. It can get pretty tiresome pretty quickly, and some people got quite bored with it in short manner because of this, and I don't really blame them. The game does literally like nothing to mix it up, especially near the beginning. Like, the targets just aren't mixed up at all. Towards the end they get a little more interesting, but the first couple targets just feel borderline identical, and they just lack variety. And the next issues that I want to bring up is the sword combat. It's really quite basic and gets the job done, but that's it. It's not bad, but it's definitely not good. It's just average, and it would get so much better in the later games. My last issue is probably due to me playing the PC version on a modern computer, but I'm still going to go over it anyway. This game had so many glitches and controller issues. The game didn't support my resolution, so I just had that weird box, the lines. The controller issues were just strange. The game wouldn't recognize the triggers on my Xbox controller, so I had this weird control scheme for the game. which maybe could attribute to my issues with the controls, because I brought it up like 3 times how much I dislike the controls. So maybe it was from this. It's still an issue. And then the game just glitched out a bunch, like lots, and I mean lots of clipping. Lots of times the models, like including Altair, just glitching out entirely, just stretching, flying into the air, not working how they're supposed to. Just a lot of glitches, especially the stretching. I saw that one a number of times. There was just a lot of bugs, and I'm certain a lot of this came from being just the PC version. And so in the end, I wouldn't actually recommend the PC version. I'd actually recommend you go spend the $2.99 and buy the 360 version if you really want to play this game. Like, you absolutely have to play AC1. I'm surprised it hasn't been remade yet. But in conclusion, the first Assassin's Creed is still an alright game. It's not great, it's not amazing, but it's decent enough, that's for sure. You can tell, though, it's really the first Assassin's Creed game. Like, you can really just tell. Especially if you started with one of the later games in the franchise. It may feel a bit basic compared to the other ones, and it is to an extent, and the game can feel a bit repetitive, but I still think it's generally fine. It has a decent amount of stuff to it, and it has a decent amount to do in it. Whether you get anything for it, for doing that stuff other than completionist work, you tell me. It took me around 10 or 11 hours to beat it, but you could probably almost double that time if you wanted to get everything and do all 6 missions for every single target and just be bored. If you're curious about the beginning of Assassin's Creed, then this might be worth your time, but otherwise, you probably already played it if you're interested. Like, to be honest, if you're interested in Assassin's Creed at this point in time, you've probably already played it. And if you've played one of the later ones, I mean, it'd be pretty hard to go back to this one. But I hope I was able to add a little insight to this game. I'm glad to see that the game has aged pretty well for the most part. However, the series would definitely be on the upswing after this. And that's what I'll be looking at next. So here is the juggernaut of the Assassin's Creed series, and what most people consider to be the best of them, and one of Ubisoft's most important games. Assassin's Creed 2 was released in 2009. Jeez, it was released almost 10 years ago at this point, 9.5-ish years ago. The game would go on to have a massive critical and commercial success and would truly start the Assassin's Creed train and turn it into the monster that it is now. Assassin's Creed 2 takes place right after the first game. There is again 2 plots going on. One involves Desmond in 2012 and the other involves Ezio Auditore, our new assassin in late 15th century. So let's look at Desmond first. Well, spoilers here for the original Assassin's Creed. Desmond has just found the Apple of Eden, as Altair, and in the Animus, was promptly kicked out of the Animus by this evil professor doctor guy. Well, it turns out the woman who is actually helping the Dr. Evil guy is actually a double agent and works for the Assassins. She helps Desmond break out of the place and escape the Templars. They end up in some warehouse, where the two meet up with fellow assassins who are trying to locate another piece of Eden, and they're still trying to train Desmond to become an assassin. He's fine with becoming an assassin again. At the beginning of the first game, he talks about how he didn't want to do it, but now he's just on board with it. In the Animus, he is actually learning all the skills of Ezio, so he's about to become hella raw in a quick manner. So Desmond spends pretty much the whole game in the Animus again, living out Ezio's life. Now, Ezio Auditore has a much more interesting backstory than Altair. He isn't part of the Assassins yet, actually. He is a young man in the beginning and is just having some fun here or there. And well, his father and brothers end up getting betrayed and killed right in front of him. This naturally pisses him off, and he demands vengeance against the ones that killed his family. Well, his uncle Mario explains that the men who killed his family were Templars, and they are assassins. They need to take out these Templars, and Ezio agrees to it. The story takes place over the course of like 20 years as Ezio, taking out tons of corrupt and just evil figures all over Italy. They're all Templars, of course. The story in Assassin's Creed 2 is actually pretty good. Ezio's quest is just so much better than Altair's. He doesn't just start in the Creed. He joins it and we see him grow up, become wiser and develop. He has a great attitude, is great with the ladies, and is overall just a fantastic protagonist. There's a reason Ezio became the face of Ubisoft for a while. And if you still think of Assassin's Creed, if you're going to think of a character from Assassin's Creed, Ezio's definitely the first one you think of. He is just excellent. Altair really did not have the most amazing personality. He was just sort of a cold, hard assassin, and Ezio is not like that at all. He is much more human and lifelike. He feels grief, he feels sadness, anger, and he just feels all the emotions. It's not just slightly annoyed or inconvenienced like Altair. It is just really well done. The setting is quite fantastic, and it makes me actually want to go travel there, to be honest. It's really unique, and I like it actually. Now, Desmond's story, it's not actually that bad. In the first games, I thought it was really poor for a variety of reasons, but I think Assassin's Creed 2, it got a bit better. It's less vague, it's more clear-cut. The beginning of the story is still kind of bad, but the ending is actually pretty good and really interesting. I actually really like the ending. So it is that going for it. It isn't really great overall, but it's not crap like the first games. It's just kind of alright. But that's still an improvement over the first game's Desmond stuff. So now it's time for the gameplay of Assassin's Creed 2. Like the first game, you control Desmond and the assassin in the Animus, this time being Ezio. Desmond doesn't really do that much. You play as him 3 times, I think. He can punch, block, and parkour a bit, but nothing big or mind-blowing. He's still honing his skills in this game. Ezio is a lot more versatile and better than Altair ever was. A decent amount of the game has changed. Ezio can walk, fast walk, punch, and use eagle visions for clues. He can run as well, which allows him to free run, parkour, jump around, and tackle people. The free running has been vastly improved over the previous game. Not only is it much smoother, but there were a lot less times where it was just totally unresponsive. Ezio can jump further, higher, and quicker than Altair ever could, and you'll never want to go back to the original after this. Pickpocketing has just become a normal mechanic in the game. You just walk up to somebody when you're holding A or X, and you'll just steal from them right there. It's pretty funny, honestly. Ezio does not regenerate health back. He actually has to get medicine, which is bought from a doctor. These are just generic stores that are all over the map. Ezio has much, much more tools than Assassin's Creed 1 lets you play with. He not only has the hidden blade, but he has 2 hidden blades, allowing him to go for double the kills. He has a sword still and throwing daggers. He also gets a secret gun on his arm. That's cool. He even gets cleavers and just more tools than that. The amount of tools you get adds to the variety of ways to kill. My favorite, though, is still just jumping on top of somebody with the hidden blade and just totally destroying them. The combat also returns from the previous game, but is a little better. You can still attack, block, and parry. Enemies have health bars. That's nice. There was no health bars in the original. The combat feels a bit off, but it's better here, that's for sure. You can strafe more, I noticed that. But it's generally the same combat for when you get into fights. But what can Ezio do outside of combat? Well, he can do a lot, actually. Not only does he do free running better, but he can swim, he can ride horses, pretty much wherever he wants, except in deep cities. Altair can only ride him in the countryside. And he can use boats. He can row them. Whoa. When it comes to detection and stealth, he is also way better. You still can hide in the hay, hide in the thing on the rooftops, and sit on benches, but new to the series is the idea of crowds. If there are 3 or more people, just walk into them and you'll blend in and the guards won't even see you, just like that. Works with any people, not just the monks. In the original game, it was just the monks. Here, you just blend into the crowd. All around the cities are people to temporarily hire also. These are thieves, warriors that help fight, or ladies that actually just let you blend into them, making for some really good stealth, some just hide in plain sight social stealth. The detection system is pretty different as well. Guards will follow Ezio until their line of sight is broken. Once it's broken, they will search the surrounding areas, which is marked on the minimap with a circle. It means the guards eventually give up and won't just tail you for basically ever until you hide, which is nice. The game has a detection system. The more guards you kill, the higher the detection. If the detection meter fills up, the moment a guard even thinks they see you, they will become suspicious. If it is low, though, they won't even think twice about you. Once it gets raised, you can lower it by ripping wanted posters down or killing corrupt officials. Something new to the game is the idea of money. Yeah, money. You get money in the game. You can spend it on health items, better armor, or poison, or weapons, or a location. If you spend money on a location, you have a revenue every so often in real time. You get money from revenue, pickpocketing, or completing missions. Which leads me to the open world. The game is super open, giving you free range to do anything you want. There are main missions to do, of course, but there are also side assassinations. There are races, delivering mail, or breaking into a Templar stronghold. Additionally, there are these 6 tombs to raid for a piece of a puzzle that lets you get legendary armor and a weapon. These tombs are all about platforming and are like Prince of Persia, you know, the thing Assassin's Creed originally was. A lot of the side activities are also. There is a lot of collectibles, of course. There are chests all over the map and the codex pages from Altair. Okay, maybe there's not a bunch, but there's a decent amount. I'm going to just tell you right now that you actually do need all of these, though, to beat the game, which I was not a fan of. You do need all of Altair's pages. Okay, but what about the main missions of Assassin's Creed 2? In the first game, it was generally repetitive, as it was just to take out the 9 targets. This game has so much more variety. You will be doing all sorts of things in this game. It's great. You'll primarily be doing assassinations, of course, though. You'll be given a target or targets and be told you need to take them out. However, a lot of them are in much better designed environments, and it makes it much less stale. There is tailing missions where you follow someone in stealth to learn information, occasional pickpocketing as well. The investigation process is just a lot more refined and kind of just cuts the crap out. But I will say that a decent amount of the missions feature you following someone as they talk to you and you walk as slow as possible. And of course, in all this, you'll still be free running all over, making sure to climb those tall towers to unlock everything on the map in the area. And now that brings us to the environment. Now, speaking of the environment, it is just so much better developed. Now, in the first game, I thought it was fine for how the cities were designed and lended itself to some decent rooftop running. However, AC2, the design, I feel, is just really good. Lots of areas like for free running, just tons of free running areas, lots of platforming. I really just love it. The way it's designed, it's just designed so you can free run as fast as you can, jump all over, and it's just a lot more fun to use these mechanics. That's the general gameplay of Assassin's Creed 2. It greatly expands on the original, and it's been said a million times before how it's much better than the original, and it's just a much more refined game than the original. It's true. The gameplay is more varied, the controls are tighter and better, you have more options. It would go on to influence every Ubisoft game for like the next decade as well. Climb tall thing, hella stuff to do on an open world map, but to be honest, I had a blast playing it here. The game was quite fun and gave me many hours of enjoyment. So now let's take a look at the AAA game graphics. The game, it looks pretty good. It looks quite a bit better than the first game. It's hard to believe that this is almost 10 years old now, as it even looks decent today. The textures and environments, they all look great for the time and even decent today. They're all crisp and they look good. The lighting in the game is just fantastic, honestly. It is excellent here, and the shadows are equally as fantastic. Just awesome, honestly. The character models are again the best. The animation is so detailed and good. Ezio himself is just fantastic with such lifelike movement, and it's just a joy to look around. His movements are just fantastic all around. The frame rate occasionally dipped, but for most of the time it was great. I think the character models are the best, and the game looks fantastic as a whole. Of course, there were some clipping issues and glitches, of course. That's just an Assassin's Creed staple. But overall, it was great. The optimization was not amazing, though, on my PC. The game still didn't recognize my triggers on my Xbox One controller. It did support my resolution, though, but it wouldn't work with Fraps, so I had to use open broadcast software, so the quality of this recording looks a bit worse because of it. Now on to the sound. The sound was good, great even. The quality was all good, of course. The music in the game is actually alright. It wasn't generic mostly, and there were some memorable tracks. I'd say it was around as good as the first Assassin's Creed, maybe a little better. I think it's actually good and has a decent amount of tracks that are alright. It could be a bit better, but it's still better than the first one, I think. The voice acting is actually really good for everyone. The accents are mega on point here. In the first Assassin's Creed, all the accents were on point except for Altair. He just had an American accent, but not here. All the accents are on point. The way they speak and how they speak is really accurate to the times and really just good. All really good. Part of the story being so good is the voice acting. Even Desmond Miles is decent enough in the game. Better than the first one, that's for sure. The sound, I really got no complaints at all. But this brings me, of course, to the part of the review where I talk about the complaints. What don't I like about the game? Well, to be honest, I only have a few small complaints as opposed to a bunch like the original. The game can occasionally still feel a little repetitive to an extent. Nowhere near as much as the last time, but a little bit, to be honest. The free running, it's not perfect. There are still times where he just won't jump to where you want him to, and certain precise platforming can just be really tricky. I would say like a good 80 or 90% of the time it was perfect, but that 10% shows its ugly head occasionally. But I'd still think it was pretty good. Collecting all the codex pages at the end of the game was a bit lame, and I didn't think I had to do that, and it added about an hour of unneeded game time, to be honest. There were some glitches like I previously mentioned, but that's just a staple in the Assassin's Creed franchise. The combat is still, it doesn't feel amazing or even that great. Even with the new disarm mechanic, it just felt okay. I wasn't really huge on the combat, but really all of these are little gripes with the game, to be honest. In general, what do I think of the game? I think it's fantastic. It's excellent, and I think it really does deserve all the praise it has gotten. It is actually really good. It's not perfect, but the game is still great on a variety of levels. Its story, characters, and varied gameplay make it a blast to play. It is definitely one of the better open worlds of the last decade. It has a ton of stuff to do in it, and it is much more polished than the first game. If you like open world games or want to get into the series, I'd probably recommend this one, especially over the first one. Most people seem to get into the series with the second game, and it makes sense. It's a hell of a lot better than the first one. I think the game is really good with only a few minor flaws. The game would go on to be really well received as well, being nominated for Game of the Year even, and it would start the train that is known as Assassin's Creed. But that wouldn't have happened if this game wasn't as good as it is. It's also dirt cheap now, so if you haven't played it, there's really no reason to not play it at this point, so check it out. So here we are with the next Assassin's Creed. Instead of being a numbered sequel, the game would actually be called Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Released in 2010, Brotherhood was released for consoles at the time, and PC. Well, Brotherhood takes place right after Assassin's Creed 2, so spoilers are happening. After Ezio sees the goddess and is like, what the hell, he has the Apple of Eden and gets rid of the staff. He goes home, and after a night of fun, well, a new army known as the Borgia shows up and annihilates his place and kills his uncle. Well, Ezio almost dies, but wakes up in Rome. In Rome, he finds out that the army that destroyed him has taken over Rome, actually, and it's up to Ezio to start a new brotherhood for the assassins and to stop the Borgia that's taken over Rome. On Desmond's side, the group sets up shop in Ezio's old place, actually, and Desmond is back in the Animus to hopefully find out what happened to that apple so that they can get it to help them stop whatever bad impeding doom that is coming. So the story is good on two fronts, I feel. The Ezio side, I think, is great and is a wonderful extension of his character and story, and I just really like it. I think the story tells a good tale and continues Ezio's quest really well and shows a lot of development in him. Desmond's story is good in the sense that it's like just as good as the last games. I'd say it's probably better, as I feel like it's more consistently good, as opposed to a boring intro. It's not great or really that good overall, but it's passable. It's not overly vague, and it's not totally boring. It's just kind of boring. It's just alright at best, and it's a nice step forward from the last game, that's for sure. Obviously, Ezio's story is significantly better, but that's how it's always been in Assassin's Creed. So in Brotherhood, it plays very similar to Assassin's Creed 2. You play as Ezio primarily, but you also do occasionally get to play as Desmond. I will go over Ezio first this time. Instead of huge areas, multiple huge areas, you're actually just in Rome, which is a massive open world. It's just Rome, though. The game is, of course, your open-world, third-person action game with stealth elements. Ezio actually loses everything from Assassin's Creed 2, as his villa is completely destroyed at the beginning. So you have to get everything back. You only start the game with literally the hidden blade, the sword, and the arm gun. Ezio is agile as ever and can still use his stealth to his full advantage, in addition to the free running, climbing on buildings, running across rooftops, and now Roman Colosseums. Climbing is pretty much everything. You can climb pretty much everything you can think of. There's still tons of ways to assassinate enemies. That just never really gets old. Crowd blending is still there. as well. Rome is a bit different from Italy. It is under Borgia control, so some liberating is needed. Certain towers are big beacons for Borgia control. Here you assassinate the leader of the area, blow the tower up, and then you can do stuff in the area. Like Assassin's Creed 2, you can buy properties and invest in them for a slow stream of money, but first you must actually liberate the area, so there is a purpose to these. And yes, climbing tall stuff to see everything in the area is still needed as well. So all that is the same from Assassin's Creed 2. And if you played Assassin's Creed 2, you'll feel right at home. But what's new? Well, the big new addition to Brotherhood is just that, the Brotherhood. Ezio starts a new creed and as such gets lackeys. Throughout exploring the open world and in the story, you get new assassins that can help you out. You can summon them to come help you whenever you want by just pressing LB/L1, and they just actually show up. Like the moment you press the button, they show up within seconds. They come to kill or aid in combat. These are actually pretty cool and they're pretty fun to summon. You get to also send them on missions. You see, you go up to like a birdhouse or like just a mission area, and there's a bunch of little side missions where Borgia has taken over tons of different places all over the world. So Ezio sends his assassins to go stop the oppression. You send them on their missions where they come back in real time, like a real life hour or so, and they complete the mission. Sometimes they don't come back, and if they don't come back, they died, and they're dead for good. So be careful what mission you send them on. When you summon them, or when they complete missions, they level up also, so there is a whole experience system with them as well. These missions, actually, where you send them away, is actually really, really deep, and there is a lot to it, and it adds a lot of game hours. Now, speaking of new things, it's time to talk about the combat. So yes, assassinating is the same. You sneak up on someone and just totally destroy their life, but combat has been much improved. Previous games had you literally just spamming the counter button, but trust me, the combat is much better here. It flows incredibly well and feels much better and satisfying than Assassin's Creed 2. Something new is that you don't have to drain an enemy's health down to kill them. You see, if Ezio is able to hit an enemy around 6 times in a row, sometimes less, he just breaks through their block and kills them. This allows you to go into a rampage execution mode where you're able to literally just one-shot enemies. If he gets hit though, it all starts over. With this, you can take out a ton of enemies in quick succession, making the combat just much faster and smoother. The gun is also hella good now. If some enemies are blocking way too much, you can just actually kick them in the nuts to break their block, and then start attacking them until you get into execution style. I really like the combat in this over the previous games, as the previous games could feel a bit tedious and just a bit off. It's much more satisfying and fast here. I will say it's a bit easier, but it's also a bit better. Additionally, you can ride horses anywhere as opposed to just the countryside. Here, even in towns, you can ride them literally everywhere. The map is a lot bigger than the cities in AC2, but there's just this one map. And there's a ton of side activities to do as well. But if you've played any other Assassin's Creed, it should feel pretty familiar. So lastly, I guess for the gameplay, it's time to mention Desmond Miles. Now, you can leave the Animus whenever you want, actually, for the first time ever, if you want to play as Desmond. So, I actually never did this. I had no desire to play as Desmond Miles, and just stuck to Ezio the entire game, minus the 2 times where you have to play as Desmond Miles. He plays exactly the same as the last 2 games. From what I can tell, he can free run and use basic combat. There's really nothing special here. That's it for the gameplay, though. It is similar to the last game, like really similar to the last game. Now, how does the game look? It looks really similar to the last game, but it still looks good. For 2010, this was on par with the times. The lighting is really good for the most part, again, with nice shadows. The textures all look smooth and pretty good on all levels. Everything looks really nice, and there is a decent level of polish. The models look great for the most part and have a lot of detail. The best part is probably the animation again, even if it probably is just reused from the last game. But it looks really smooth and nice. It animates very lifelike and fluidly still, and that's great. The game looks good. The frame rate, it wasn't perfect, it was alright, but it still dropped sometimes because there were just way too many people on screen or way too many effects like smoke. Overall, I'd say the presentation was good though. The sound was equally as good. The music in the game was actually alright. I thought it was about as good as Assassin's Creed 2. I'm shocked that it's able to keep at this level and there hasn't been any generic music yet, but it was actually good music. Not only is it really good at setting the mood and the atmosphere, but I actually thought some of it was memorable / catchy. I thought it would have been just generic crap for sure, but again, I was wrong. It was actually good. Like, in some cases, I thought 1 or 2 tracks were actually really good, so call me impressed. The sound effects were really good as well. I mean, I really like the noises added for when you assassinate someone. That's great. It was just a much better sound, and the sound design overall was good. The voice acting was as strong as ever. Ezio steals the show here and is just the best for voice acting. He really is just the best and has charisma. He's just a true Chad. Everyone else is fine, but no one touches Ezio, and that's why he's still basically the face of Assassin's Creed. Desmond was fine, but still a little on the boring side. Besides that, everyone was good. No one was really bad. Sure, some of it was better than others, but it was all pretty passable. It was pretty standard for a AAA Ubisoft game. Okay, so Assassin's Creed Brotherhood seems like a pretty fantastic game and all, but you know there's got to be something wrong with it. Of course there's something wrong with it. That's why I'm here. So let's get into it. So let's start with some of the Assassin's Creed staples. Let's just go down the list. The game is unpolished in some aspects. It's not very glitchy, but of course there's some bugs and glitches. The controls for sure are improved from 1, but they were just as unresponsive as I felt they were in 2, where Ezio wouldn't do what I wanted him to, or would just be very imprecise. It was good a majority of the time, but there's still some instances where it isn't perfect. Next is such a strange complaint. I can't even believe I'm complaining about this, but the horses in this game are just retarded. You see, in Red Dead Redemption, you summon a horse, and it shows up just like that. And, by the way, Red Dead Redemption came out the same year as this game. In Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, it's not that simple. The horses are just stupid, and they don't always come to you, often getting stuck somewhere, or you just feel like every blade of grass can stop them. They just aren't too bright. Speaking of bright, screw these loading screens with the blinding white light. I'm gonna go blind here. These don't need to be in the game. But all of these issues aren't too big, and they're all pretty synonymous with Assassin's Creed, maybe minus the retarded horses. I have 2 bigger issues with the game, though. So Assassin's Creed Brotherhood is this huge open-world game with tons of activities plastered around the map. It's a pretty standard Ubisoft affair at this point. Assassin's Creed 2 didn't really have this. Yes, there were a ton of side activities all over the map, but they didn't feel so copy and paste. What I'm saying is, in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, there's basically 5 types of side activities, and those are all just copied and pasted all over. And while that's fine, my issue stems with the fact that I don't really find most of these side activities very fun or engaging at all. The side assassinations I find to be just rather benign and a bit dull. Races and climbing stuff, that's cool enough, but I already did it in Assassin's Creed 2 where I thought it was good. And I'll just be honest here, I prefer the locations of Assassin's Creed 2 more than Rome. Rome is fine, but I just prefer multiple places in Italy than Rome. Rome, though, it isn't poorly designed at all. I just feel like, again, some of the side missions are not the most exciting. And part of my complaint about the side content really can be ignored, though, because nobody's making you do this side content. And you know what? Because of that, I didn't do most of it. My overall completion was around 50%, I think, and I just didn't feel compelled to do any more of the side content than I did. It just really couldn't hold my interest, to be honest. And I didn't even think it was better than AC2. I thought AC2 had just better side content. There are even side objectives in the main missions now, like don't get detected, don't kill anyone besides the target, but these just feel tacked on, and these would continue to be in every single Assassin's Creed game to the end of time. Now, that was my first kind of bigger complaint. Now let me look at the other one, which is a bit of a weird one, but there are so many just not great forced stealth missions, and so many of them are just, like I said, they're just not good. In AC2, there was maybe half a dozen forced stealth missions. You could be stealthy, or you could just run in there and kill everyone, which was nice. In Brotherhood, there are way more missions where if you get detected, you have to start over. And now, you might go, well, this is a stealth game. What are you talking about? Well, you know what? Stealth in Assassin's Creed has just kind of been shoddy. Because the moment one guard sees you while you're in the middle of killing him, you're detected. It's just, like, really annoying. It's like you were spotted by literally one dude out in the middle of nowhere, and the whole land, the whole world seems to know where you are, really. And I just thought there were way too many forced stealth sections in the game, and it added a bunch of trial and error. And sure, you might go, well, that's how it is in actual stealth games, but you know what? Assassin's Creed didn't make you be this stealthy before. Some of the pacing is just thrown off in these missions due to restarting a bunch, because one guard saw you and now the entire planet seems to know where you are. It's really just annoying, this whole detection system of where if one guard sees you, then everyone knows where you are. By the way, the detection system with the notoriety returns from AC2, that's just fine as well. And sometimes when you're in the middle of killing the guard, they spot you, which is just really frustrating. Like, you're literally in the middle of stabbing the dude and he spots you and he's dead, but nope, everyone knows where you are. It's just frustrating. There is one tailing mission in particular where you have to be in complete stealth and you follow a dude on the boat, and it just takes forever, and it is not fun. The tailing isn't terrible in this game, it's just being the totally stealthy during the tailing. I feel like it drags everything out. I'm not saying stealth in Assassin's Creed is bad. It's just I feel like it's really forced in Brotherhood when it doesn't need to be this forced. And I feel it leads to a lot of annoying parts of the game. And a lot of the missions I felt just borderline frustrated with. And it maybe could be just me being mad because bad. But either way, I wasn't a fan. Overall though, what do I think of Brotherhood? Oh, I think it's still a good game. I will say that I probably prefer Assassin's Creed 2 over Brotherhood, but I still think it is a good game. Some improvements were made here from Assassin's Creed 2, such as the combat, but there are aspects where Assassin's Creed 2 was better, like the location in my opinion, and definitely the side content. Other than sending the assassins away on missions around the world, I wasn't really compelled by any of the side content in Brotherhood. But if you like Assassin's Creed, you're going to really like this game, that's for sure. And Ezio is still awesome. It doesn't really change that much from the second game, but I still quite enjoyed it. If you're a completionist, though, you might want to stay away from this one. There's a lot of flags to get and side content to do. It took me only around like 10 hours to beat the game, though. It was around the same length as the first Assassin's Creed, but like I said, my overall completion was at most 50%. So you could probably almost double that game time if you want to do everything, but I didn't. This was also the Assassin's Creed that introduced multiplayer, but no one's playing that anymore. So if you like action-adventure games or open-world games and you haven't played this one, maybe you should. But I would say you really want to play the second game before you play this one. But if you played the second game, absolutely play this one. So here we are with the last Assassin's Creed in the Ezio trilogy. It's Assassin's Creed Revelations, released in 2011. I remember when this game came out and a lot of people really enjoyed it back then. So let's see if I like it now. Now again, spoilers for Assassin's Creed. This time Brotherhood, as the game is a direct sequel. Brotherhood ended with Desmond getting taken control of by the goddess Juno and killing Lucy. Well, he goes into a coma and is put into the Animus because literally why not? Well, the Animus can't distinguish Altair, Ezio, or Desmond from each other, so Desmond must live out Ezio's memories more. Ezio is at a much later part of his life, where he has left Rome entirely and is trying to unlock Altair's library and learn the ultimate secrets of the assassins. The original assassin was Altair, if you forgot, and he has to stop more Templars that show up just because. Now, to open the library, Ezio must find 5 spherical keys in Constantinople. Once Ezio finds some of the keys, you actually get to see what happened to Altair. They bring Altair back, and you get to see what happened to him after the original Assassin's Creed, where he lives out his life and is the leader of the assassins. So for Desmond's story, I think it's pretty dumb all around. I'm just not a fan of the story at all. I thought it was it's just huge filler. It's pretty lame and lackluster. I was just not having it at all with Desmond Miles. I thought it was pretty stupid and generally boring. Nothing happens with him at all, and the ending is just awful. Ezio's story, I think, is good. It's not great like 2, but it's definitely just as good as Brotherhood, I think. It's around equal to it. He has some really good character development, and I love how he is a mentor and has a real love interest. However, the ending is not that great for Ezio either. As the end to probably the greatest assassin protagonist in gaming along with Agent 47, his ending is just kind of underwhelming and falls flat, which is a bit of a shame really. But I really did like his tale in Constantinople. I thought it was good. Now Altair, he actually has a really good story through and through. I really like all of his story, and the ending was really good to him actually. His was the most interesting and the best of the 3, to be honest. So overall, with all the stories combined, it's just kind of like It's just alright. It's really nothing amazing and awesome like the previous two games. It's really just alright. Well, now on to the gameplay. So Assassin's Creed Revelations is really not a huge change from Brotherhood, which in itself wasn't a big change from 2. The new setting is Constantinople, which is like around as big as Rome, or it's somewhere equal in size, I think. I will say right off the bat, I actually do prefer Constantinople over Rome. I just think it's more interesting and has a better city design. It makes for more engaging free running than Rome did. So you play as Ezio, Desmond, and Altair. For this review, I'll start with Ezio. He's the primary character. He plays exactly the same as he did in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, which was exactly the same almost as 2, with only a slight differences. He doesn't lose all his gear, actually. You get everything here from the start, except you have crap armor now. Now, everything that was in Brotherhood is here, literally like everything, unless it had to do with Rome itself. Free running, stealth in plain sight, all the sweet assassinations and combat options that were added, it's all here. There are a few minor additions in terms of gadgets. The main one is the hook blade, which allows Ezio to reach further and lets him use zip lines. He can also climb faster with it. Summoning assassins returns in addition to sending them out on missions. The way you take back areas from the Templars are the same, with the head honcho being killed and blowing up the building. Shops can then be purchased to have a natural revenue. You can buy goods like weapons, new armor, medicine, treasure maps, etc. Something new is that once you capture an area, you can set up an assassin's den here, so you can fast travel and do other stuff there. There is a few benefits to setting one up. However, every so often, Templars come back, and they try to take back that assassin's den, which leads to this new tower defense minigame where you place down units and defend an area. I only did this once, to be honest, and I'll explain why in a bit. Lastly, the only other new additions is that instead of flags, it's data fragments that you collect, which have a bit more of a use. Also, they added bombs in the game with tons of options, and I'll go over that shortly as well. The gameplay is really almost identical to Brotherhood for Ezio. This is a case of if it ain't broke, don't fix it though, as I think the gameplay stands up just as well as it did in Brotherhood for the most part. There is still a good variety of side missions, and I tried a couple of them, but again, I just wasn't too interested. Now, there are two other types of gameplay. You see, once Ezio finds one of Altair's keys, then he plays out a memory of Altair, actually. Now, Altair's levels are extremely linear and a set path. There's no free roaming, there's no open world, or anything like that. No. And it's pretty much just Ezio minus all the cool gadgets. It's back to Assassin's Creed 1 in terms of gear. I actually really like these segments. I think they break up the pace really well. Them being linear isn't an issue for me at all. They aren't very long, though, but I did like them nonetheless. Then there is also Desmond Miles. So as Ezio, you collect memory fragments instead of the flags, like I mentioned, and once you collect enough of these, you actually get to play through a section of the game as Desmond in this first-person like puzzle sequence. If you're watching the video, you'll notice that this is not Desmond gameplay. Why is that? Well, I never actually played as Desmond, to be honest. This kind of gameplay just didn't interest me right off the bat. It was optional. Once I found out it was optional, I was like, no, I'm not interested. And I didn't even get enough data fragments, honestly, to even get a level. So, moving on now. The gameplay as a whole in Revelations, I think, is still pretty good. The Ezio stuff is cool, Altair's stuff is great, and Desmond exists. The city of Constantinople is really fun to traverse, and it feels different from Brotherhood with a lot less empty areas. It's pretty much all city throughout. And there is so much city, actually, that there's not even horses to ride anymore. It's enough to stand on its own, that's for sure. Now, when it comes to the presentation of the game, this is one area of the game that I'm really mixed about. Okay, the textures, they all look decent. They don't look amazing for 2011, but they all look fine. They're all passable with some occasionally muddy textures. The buildings look nice, the landscapes are fine. So while the textures may be pretty alright, unfortunately the frame rate was not that great. It really did have slowdown for me sometimes, and I have more than a good enough PC for the game. The game's frame rate dipped when too much was going on, and that was noticeable. Sure, there was like 100 people on screen, but the game just began to slow down. There was a bit of screen tearing from this as well. Like, what is going on here? I also had this weird, like, I had to use a weird file to get the game to work with my resolution. Otherwise, it would just go crazy. But besides that, the PC port is fine, but it's just that. It's fine. But that frame rate, I don't know what went wrong there. In Brotherhood, it ran pretty much fine on my computer. Then we get to like the biggest issue of the graphics, the faces. Like, what the hell is wrong with these models and their faces? They looked fine in Brotherhood, but now they look like crap. Desmond looks awful. What was wrong with him? This barely even looks like him. Ezio looks so off, and the other faces just look quite poor in quality. Like, what is this? Why do they all look so bad? They look nothing like Brotherhood. I'm not sure what went wrong here either. All the animations are fine and probably reused anyway. They are really fine. There's nothing to comment on there, but the faces, I don't know what's wrong with that. The presentation as a whole, I just really was not digging it, to be honest. Something went wrong here. Sound, though, I gotta give credit where credit is due. It's good, it's good. The sound effects are pretty much the same as it's always been, and these are fine. The voice acting is great again. The accents are absolutely on point, especially since Ezio is one of the only few Italians in the game. I thought his accent was great. Something I noticed is that Altair is a completely different voice actor, and it's actually way more authentic to where he is actually geographically located, which is definitely nice. There's no American accent here. His accent was super on point. It was a bit jarring at first to have a different voice actor, but it was honestly better than the original Altair, which sounded like a generic white guy. I think this is way better. The voice acting gets full marks here. The music in the game was also authentic, and it was good. It wasn't generic crap, and it really set the mood nice. It wasn't like amazing, but I thought it was still alright. Some of the stealth themes I thought were really good in the game, and I was actually a decent fan of the music. The sound, I'm gonna just go off and say it's all good here, really. But this is the time of the review where I flip and talk about stuff that sucks with the game. What are the complaints with the game? Now, Revelations, it does some things that are honestly questionable at best. At best. The first is the most common complaint with the game, and that's the tower defense. These really feel out of left field and do not belong in Assassin's Creed, and they're just not very fun. They're really easy and just kind of boring. I was not a fan of these at all. They just seem really unfocused, to be honest. Why are these even here? Like, why? Next is the bombs. There are like 15 bombs you can make in this game. Like, tons of different bombs. Noise bombs, actual bombs, nukes. Okay, maybe not that one. But you can just make a ton of these. And I'll just be honest, I never even like really used them other than occasionally. I saw little to no reason to even use these. Some of the missions in the game don't let you get detected. I mean, you can't use bombs, then the whole mission. The menu to make them is fine, it's simplistic enough, the crafting is fine, but I honestly forgot I even had them, and I never needed them. And it's bombs in a part stealth game, huh? I will say the stealth missions in Revelations are better than Brotherhood's. There was much less annoying ones, and they were just better than Brotherhood's. Now, Desmond stuff. Again, it just didn't interest me at all, but I didn't try it, so there's no judgment there. Now, a lot of the side stuff revolves around Desmond and the tower defense, so naturally, I really didn't want to do the side stuff in Revelations, and I didn't. But the general complaint with Assassin's Creed Revelations really seems to be that it just is Brotherhood 2, which was an extension of Assassin's Creed 2 and doesn't add much. And yeah, that's fair, it doesn't really add much. It doesn't really improve on anything either. The controls are still as finicky as ever. Horses being retarded in Brotherhood are gone, because there are no horses. You still climb tall thing, use eagle vision, which has been changed, might add. It's like Batman Arkham now for some reason, but this is pretty irrelevant, to be honest. Despite not adding much, I think the foundation is still solid enough, and the game is still fun. The game is good, almost great, but it just misses the mark for the issues that I mentioned. It's a flawed game, that's for sure. But a lot of people saw a big improvement every Assassin's Creed, and this one just kind of stayed the same, or in a couple cases got worse. It has a lot of good to it, but it has some bad as well. I can't really recommend this game as much as the previous two games, and while I will say I actually like the game about as much as Brotherhood, I would say it's pretty even of which one's better. But in the end, I would only really recommend this game to people who haven't played it who like Assassin's Creed, and that's it. Otherwise, you could really just skip this game and nothing really important happens in the game, like at all. Like, I'm not even exaggerating, like nothing happens that's important. So with that in mind, Assassin's Creed really needed to be mixed up after this. Like, they just needed something different. and the series would actually leave Ezio and go to another time period, and that's what I'll be looking at soon enough. So here we are with Assassin's Creed 3 now, released initially in 2012 for the consoles at the time and the PC, even the Wii U. But now, this year, 2019, the game has been remastered or whatever for modern consoles as well, but I'm still reviewing the original PC release. So Assassin's Creed 3 was a huge leap forward for the series as they were leaving the Italian setting altogether. No Ezio or any of that stuff from the last couple games, nope. New setting, new character to play as, and the conclusion to Desmond's storyline that was started a couple games ago. So the story continues right after the end of Revelations where Desmond wakes up. They then end up in this cave, now with Desmond's father, and there's a giant barrier preventing them from going to where the gods are, I guess, to stop the 2012 apocalypse. But in order to get past the giant barrier, they need one last piece of Eden or key or whatever that was hidden from one of Desmond's ancestors again. So Desmond's going back into the Animus. In the Animus, you play as Connor, the one who would go to hide this piece of Eden. Well, at first you play as this guy named Hatham for like 3 hours. He comes on over to Developing America, and then you get to play as Connor. Connor is a Native American who we get to see grow up in a Native American setting. Well, one day as a kid he gets jumped by this guy named Charles Lee, and he basically gets knocked out. When he wakes up, his village is on fire and his mother dies. Several years later, he is living with another tribe. Well, apparently men are coming to take down his tribe and take the land from him, basically. Well, Connor is sick of this crap happening to Native Americans, but knows Charles Lee is responsible. He's then told to find, like, the only assassin in America, Achilles, this older black man living in the woods. Connor joins him and joins the assassins, and after years of training, he begins his conquest against Charles Lee and his people, really, and take his revenge for taking his land. Along the way, well, this little thing called the Revolutionary War happens, so Connor ends up helping a bunch of America's greatest icons to further disrupt these corrupt Templars and win back America's freedom. Connor plays a big role in this, honestly, as he even dumps the tea with others. He participates in some battles, and he has just a number of different appearances in classic Civil War battles that you look at in history books. But to be honest, the story I'm kind of mixed on, actually. As a whole, Connor and Desmond, I'm pretty mixed. It's not amazing, really, and I thought it was just really okay when it comes to the story. There are some parts I think are really good. It's just when it comes to the story, it can feel really sloppy at times. I think the beginning of the game where you grow up as Connor is really good from a story perspective. I think it's really good at establishing Connor, and I think it's a good intro. But the whole Hatham thing, I think it was just really unnecessary, to be honest, and it was just meh at best. Seeing Connor grow up in his struggles, all good, but the Hatham thing, I don't even know why this is honestly here. However, about at the halfway mark, Connor just really does not evolve as a character or change at all. He just stays the same, and it becomes quite stale, to be honest. He just starts as angry Native American that argues with everyone and hates how his people are treating, and he continues to be angry Native American that argues with everyone and hates how his people are treated. Nothing really changes for him, despite everything else changing around him. He isn't a terrible protagonist, but he certainly wasn't as good as the previous two protagonists in the series. He's just pretty bland in the end, honestly. And in that part, it feels just kind of sloppy when they add the American history. Don't get me wrong. When it happens and you're participating in it, that is cool. But then the rest of the story is just kind of thrown in. It's just kind of thrown in altogether, it seems. And Connor clearly has no interest in overthrowing the British. The entire point of, the Civil War. He really just cares about his people. And it's only when he learns that Charles Lee is involved is when he does a single thing anyway. Those parts of the story just feel honestly phoned in, thrown in to remind you, oh hey, look what time period it is. The Civil War parts just don't even feel that connected, honestly. It feels like there's almost two stories in Connor's part. One part is the Revolutionary War, while the other part is Connor versus the Templars, who is basically Charles Lee. And maybe that's the point, that there's two stories here, but if that's the case, it just feels very misguided. These two stories honestly just clash with each other, I feel, and neither one was really better than the other. They're both just kind of meh at best. Both of them have some good parts, but neither one really gets over the other one, or is even great, or is even that good, really. And I will say the ending for Connor, though, despite these issues, is actually pretty satisfying, and I quite liked it. This brings me to Desmond. Now, after all these games building up this huge event, the story is just kind of uneventful. It's either uneventful or just lacks impact and is borderline anticlimactic. No, it really is anticlimactic. There are multiple parts of the game for Desmond that build upon like 5 games now, and the resolution is just really anticlimactic. It doesn't feel like a big deal when it happens. The ending is the biggest offender here and is just extremely anticlimactic, and it's honestly really funny how the game ends. Desmond's ending is just straight up bad. His story isn't totally awful, as it was definitely worse in the original game and Revelations, and this is technically a step in the right direction, but I mean, it's not better. Like, at its very best, it's just average. Wrapping up the story as a whole, like I said, it's really mixed, and if I'm able to go on for 5 minutes how it's mixed, it's probably not that great. But I digress. I am done talking about the mixed story now. Let's talk about the gameplay. There is still Animus gameplay and Desmond gameplay. I'll actually go over Desmond first to mix it up. Desmond actually has a lot of gameplay in this game, way more than any of the previous games, and it's forced. Desmond can do everything Ezio could. He has the 2 hidden blades, he can parkour, and he can blend in for stealth. There are quite a few segments with him in modern day, and I'll be honest, I'm kind of shocked to say this, but I actually like these. Yeah, I actually like the modern day stuff, the modern day free running and being stealthy. I think it was kind of refreshing to the series, and it's pretty cool. These are linear, of course, but they're decently designed, and I think they're at the very least interesting. It's definitely the best gameplay Desmond has ever had. Okay, so now onto the Animus gameplay. So you play as Hatham a little bit, but I'm not even going to bother with that. I'm going to just go over Connor. So the game is, of course, still an open world game where you use stealth, parkour, and combat to complete missions. The setting is completely different from the last couple games. Instead of like one city, there's actually this big open world. There's Boston and New York, but all the surrounding wildlife areas. And honestly, you might spend more time in the forest than the cities. So the constantly running around on buildings gameplay is here, but is barely in here compared to the other games. Speaking of running around and parkour in general, the system has been simplified. You just hold right trigger now. You don't have to hold a bunch of buttons or press any other buttons. It has been simplified, and I gotta say the controls are better just for that alone. But in terms of getting stuck on stuff and generally losing control of the character, it happened honestly the same amount of times as it did in the last couple games. But you won't be just climbing buildings anymore. No, there's forests. Yes, you can parkour in the wilderness, and I'll be honest, this feels much smoother than the cities. The parkour mechanic feels much smoother in reality, but maybe it's only a little smoother. Like, to be honest, it was kind of hard to tell. But at least you don't have to hold the A button anymore when you're holding right trigger. The combat has also been modified. Not only have the controls been changed, but it's also hugely simplified. Connor can actually dual-wield weapons and has way more weapons than Ezio ever had. Tons of swords, pistols, and of course he's got to have the tomahawk, my favorite weapon. And he has the blades. There is no lock-on mechanic anymore, which is kind of weird at first, but I got used to it. Connor can do a multi-counter, which feels very Batman Arkham. The enemies don't have health bars anymore, and most red coats go down in just a hit or two. Just do the like 5 attacks on an enemy and Connor begins executing just like previous games, and you go on a rampage executing dudes left and right. Now, like I mentioned previously, there are actually real guns in this game, not just the arm cannon. No, we're talking like flintlocks and rifles now. Connor always has a flintlock on him, and when you fire it, you'll have to reload, which does take forever. Muskets, on the other hand, are picked up and they need to be dropped in order to use another weapon. Because the enemies have guns, Connor he can use his enemies as human shields. Also, when running from enemies, when they pursue you, instead of throwing rocks at you, they will shoot at you. Speaking of running away from enemies, the notoriety system is basically the same as it was before. Break line of sight long enough and get out of dodge. And to lower notoriety, you remove posters or pay off officials. Now, strangely enough, they got rid of the health-related objects again. Yeah, you just regenerate health again. So, I mean, take that as you will. Another thing that has been changed a bit is the stealth. Connor can hide in way more stuff now, like tall grass, bushes, and trees also. You only need 2 people actually to blend in now, which is nice. Also, you don't need a crowd or anything. The stealth is just as good as it was in the previous games, maybe even a little better, I would say. But that's it really for character improvements. But how about these missions? What are you doing in the missions in this game? Well, to be honest, it's mostly the same as it's always been. Trailing missions, assassination missions, and rushing to go somewhere as fast as you can. Horses return and aren't retarded. Many missions are the same as most of the Assassin's Creed missions up to this point. However, some missions actually have you helping out during battles, like helping soldiers fight off redcoats, and you know what, whenever they decide to mix it up and throw these missions in, they're kind of fun. And they definitely feel better than the tower defense in Revelations, and they don't feel out of place at all since it's the Revolutionary War. Now, while the missions may feel similar to the previous games, the open world and its missions are pretty different. Like in the open world itself, there is hunting in the game. Yes, you can lay traps, hunt animals, and all that good stuff. It feels pretty similar to Far Cry 3, which came out a year prior. Instead of the big assassins system from the previous two games, there's like 6 people who can help you, and they can still be summoned with left bumper. That's the same, but you don't send them out on missions anymore. You first have to help them out in a side mission, and then they will assist you in your homestead. Now, your homestead is your base. They can upgrade it, give you new items and weapons. There is also a ton of side missions in the game that aren't related to the homestead, like helping with riots, finding fast travel tunnels, or investigating alleged UFOs. The new collectible in the game is the almanac pages that fly around, and you can collect these if you want. Now, for the last part of gameplay, something you only do a handful of times, maybe like 4 or 5 times in the game, but I wish you did more. They introduced naval combat. Assassin's Creed 3 introduces you to ship exploration and combat. These are awesome and are a great departure from the norm. You command the ships as you explore the seas and take on enemies. You can control the speed and have 2 attacks, cannons and a swivel. You can also take cover when you are being attacked. The ship combat is pretty alright in this game. You can even smash into other boats and board them. Gee, it's almost like you're like a pirate or something. If only like Ubisoft would make a whole game based off this, that would be interesting. Well, anything related to the ship stuff is pretty awesome, and there are side missions here with treasure and stuff, so there is actually a lot to do in Assassin's Creed. There's not only a decently long story, but there is a ton, and I mean a ton of side activities like the homestead side missions, treasure, etc. like I mentioned. Oh yeah, and you can still climb tall stuff to sync, but I think I only did this like twice in the game. There's not that many sync points actually. There is arguably more to do in this Assassin's Creed than any of the previous games, and it kind of breathes the Ubisoft game stereotype. Huge open world, tons of side stuff, climb tall thing, but to be fair, Assassin's Creed created this gameplay style. Let's hold off on the gameplay for a second and talk about the presentation. Like I mentioned, I'm playing the original PC version, which I know looks a lot better than the original console version. The game looks good. It doesn't look amazing for 2012, but it looks good. The textures and environments I am kind of mixed about. The forest and wildlife look great in the game, I feel. I think all these look good, don't get me wrong. Everything has a nice amount of detail. However, the cities in the game look pretty poor. They just don't have anywhere near the same amount of detail and just look average. The buildings in these environments don't look that good, and the detail is very plain. The rooftops in particular look pretty meh, to be honest. See, the effects like rain and snow, they look much better. The lighting in general was alright, I felt. The character models were very average in this game, I thought. They didn't look amazing, but not bad. And they, at the very least, stood toe-to-toe with Brotherhood, because Revelations just got it wrong. The models look decent, and they generally look good. But, again, they're just kind of average. The main characters look good in the game compared to the other ones, but the other characters other than the main ones, ugh. The animation was fine. It was basically the same as the last couple games. I got really nothing to say there. It was really nothing out of the ordinary. There was nothing out of place, except there was a bit of clipping issues I noticed. I noticed actually a lot of clipping issues, maybe the most in the whole series actually, up to this point. When it comes to performance, it was a bit mixed for the game. The frame rate was okay. It didn't really drop on me like all that much, which was good. The actual PC port was not very good. It didn't support my resolution when previous Assassin's Creed games did. The port had little to no graphical options where the previous games did also. The port was very meh in general, but I am sure that the Assassin's Creed 3 remastered version has a better port. Now on to the sound. The sound in AC3 was okay, I felt. The music really did not stand out at all. Now, at the beginning of the game, all the music is authentic Native American music, and I thought this was generally fantastic, and it adds authenticity and was generally great. All this was good, and I wish there was a lot more of it, and the game really needed it. The other music was sadly bland, forgettable, generic crap. Maybe one track was good, but that was it. It was all forgettable and generic. Nothing stood out at all. I did not feel it with this music. It was only a matter of time before there was just bad music in the series, and this is the one here. It was just totally lame here and did not get me in the mood to play this game at all. At least the quality was decent. I really like the sound effects in this game. The weapons are awesome and the guns are good. They're all authentic and all that jazz. The voice acting I'm kind of mixed on. So again, at the beginning part, it was super authentic. All the Native Americans speak in their native language, which is totally awesome. I very much appreciate that. I really like this, and I wish there was honestly more of it in the game. However, after the beginning, it's like it never happens again. The rest of the voice acting is just plain. That's like the perfect word for it, is just plain. Connor is decent, Hatham is decent, everyone else is decent. They speak like how people would back then, and that's nice, but other than that, other than the authentic talk, it's really got nothing else going for it. It's just decent. Nothing was amazing, and after how amazing Ezio was, this just honestly feels like a step back. And of course, our favorite, Desmond Miles. Yeah, he was pretty decent in the game, but he does have one really funny moment.
Fucking Templars.
He and his friends, though, really are nothing special. That's the voice acting as a whole, just nothing special. Most of it's just there and is average. Okay, now that I'm done talking about the presentation, sound, and all that, it's time to get to the real complaints. What really does suck with Assassin's Creed 3? Well, let's state the obvious. The game feels unpolished at times, clipping like I mentioned, and glitches. The game crashed on me multiple times as well. The controls are not perfect, as you accidentally run up walls or just generally get hung up on the environment. It's just not perfect. It never has been in Assassin's Creed, and it's not here. Speaking of controls, why do they, like almost every single game, change the damn controls? I can't get used to it. In one game, counter is right bumper, in the next it's right trigger, and now it's the B button. Okay. At least it stays the B button for a while, I think. It's different like every time, though. My next issue is that the game takes a really long time to get started. This issue has been beaten like a dead horse, so I won't harp on it too much. I'll just say it takes you a number of hours before the real game starts up. Next is that some missions just feel really repetitive. Yeah, after 5 games, some of these missions don't exactly feel fresh. You'll do a cool ass mission where you're helping Paul Revere and warn people of the British that they're coming, and then you'll be subjected to like 4 trailing missions in a row. And I'm not exaggerating, like 4 trailing missions in a row. Like, come on. Some missions are better than others, and I'm just gonna leave it at that. Speaking of missions, let's talk about those side missions. So yes, there is a ton of side missions in this game, like I mentioned, of course, but I'll be honest, these just suck, and they didn't interest me in the slightest. They're generally repetitive and generally uninteresting. You do them once or twice, and you're like, yeah, that was alright. But how about 10, 11 times? No, I'm good. They really did not grab my attention at all. The side content was plentiful, it definitely was that. It just wasn't very good in my opinion. The side collectible in the game, the almanac pages, they can eat a dick. These are horrible. They fly around and you try to get them and you just end up chasing them, and then you try to get them, but then they just fly off because you weren't fast enough, and it's like, try again. It's like I'm going out of my way to even attempt to get this stupid side collectible, and they spit in my face and have it fly around all like that, and then it flies away and I have to come back later to try to get it again. Like, no, get out of here, you stupid page. Really just adds to my point that the side stuff just isn't very good, or at least not worth your time. Now we get to my biggest issue with the game. No, it's not the controls, it's not the side missions, it's not Connor being boring, it's the transitions. The transitions in this game are the worst I have ever seen in a video game, ever. And I mean ever. In previous Assassin's Creed games, when you were loading in, you would be in a kind of white area. Yeah, nothing big. Okay, in Assassin's Creed 3, you were in this borderline, blinding white light. Now, Joe Nathan, that's just the loading screen, you might say. Okay, that's just the loading screen. How about every single transition screen? This blinding white light, like actually blinding white light, I might say, is just everywhere. Pause the game, blinding light. Go into a menu, blinding light. Which might I add are awful. Go look at the map, blinding light. Go into a building, blinding light. Change your weapon, blinding light. Everything, blinding light. Cutscenes begin or end. Blinding white light. It's everywhere. It is everywhere. A segment changes in the mission, like guards being shown up, blinding white light. A lot of the time, it's for like 1 or 2 seconds. It's not even long. No, this was just absolutely atrocious. I cannot believe how horrible this is. This was just awful. Now, I know I probably just have sensitive eyes, but I've gotten optical migraines from some games like Dark Souls and Far Cry, but this was just borderline torture to my eyes. And I played the game with as many lights on as possible on me, so I could be in a bright environment, but it was just not enough. I had to physically look away from the screen when I knew that it was going to load, or I was going to change missions or pause the game. Like, what the hell? I'm already colorblind. I don't need to go fully blind from this damn game. Whoever designed this game, I hope you get really bad luck. Like getting keys stuck in a locked car bad luck, because this is just awful. Or getting locked outside your house or something. It ruined my immersion. It made my eyes hurt. It gave me a headache, and I had to look away. It was just unacceptable. Blinding white light. It made me not want to play the game, and I rushed through it as quickly as possible, like just to get away from this blinding light. Screw these side missions. This game is legitimately hurting me with all this white light. It's just crap. Like, get me the hell out of here. I can't believe that this is even here. Then there's like no mod to even get rid of it. This is just unacceptable. No, get me as far away from this game as possible. Even editing this review, even editing the footage I recorded, it sucks. This game, it's just absolutely, it just kills the game for me. It just kills the game. In conclusion, Assassin's Creed 3, it does a lot right, but it does even more wrong. While it does improve on its systems like the stealth and combat and general parkouring and has a pretty cool time period / setting, it falters with its story, its characters being ultimately kind of forgettable, the end of Desmond Miles' story being nothing special either. It is a bunch of side content you probably don't want to do, and while it does have some nice parts to it with some good missions and the ship stuff, it gets dragged down completely by these white screens. Based off of the white screens alone, I cannot recommend this game to anybody, but if you aren't a pussy like me, then maybe you'll find some more enjoyment here. This is around the time public opinion actually shifted on Assassin's Creed, and it kind of went downhill here as being just a yearly milked series that is buggy and trying too hard. The game is decent at best, don't get me wrong, but like Assassin's Creed Revelations, I can only recommend it to Assassin's Creed fans. Everyone else, don't even really bother, to be honest. If you're interested in it, maybe give it a shot, but be warned about those blinding white lights. Like, I'm sure even in the remaster they're there. Play at your own risk, honestly. There would be 3 DLC episodes titled The Tyranny of King Washington that were released for this game, but I cannot take any more of these blinding white lights. Like GTFO, like, just get me away from this game and anything related to it. But after this game, Assassin's Creed would take a pretty drastic turn, to be honest. We'll look at that soon. So here we are with the last numbered Assassin's Creed game, and that is Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, which is on basically every console minus the Switch. It's even on the Wii U. So Assassin's Creed 4, when it comes to gameplay and story, there are naturally 2 parts, the real life or modern day and the Animus. So for the real life stuff, it's basically this. After the end of AC3, Abstergo Entertainment, aka the Templars, gets some of Desmond Miles' DNA. They can now use this to go back to the past in the Animus. They don't need Desmond anymore. You play as this unnamed person who I just referred to as Tablet Guy or Girl, and you are basically beta testing Abstergo's new game about pirates. So you live life through one of Desmond's ancestors. There is a bit of a side plot with Tablet Man or Woman and some other characters, a couple of which have been in previous games but ultimately mean nothing, show up. And I can tell you that anything in this real life like stuff, it's just a waste, and it's generally crap. Like, it's legitimately just a waste, and I honestly feel like anything related to this modern day stuff should not be in the game at all. There's bad real life, which is generally what Desmond had, but then there's just totally not needed at all, which is this. It's just bad. It goes pretty much nowhere. It doesn't do anything for Assassin's Creed, and it just shouldn't have been in the game to begin with. It's just bad. I don't have anything else to comment on. It's just that bad. So you're going into the Animus, and you play as Edward Kenway, who is the father to Hatham, who is the father to Connor in AC3. So basically this game takes place a good while before AC3. Basically in England, Edward is a bit of a failure. He's poor and he has a loving wife who leaves him because she's just so tired of him being a failure. So Edward tries to redeem himself and becomes a pirate in hopes of getting rich. There's a lot more to the story than that, and I mean a lot more that involves Templars, assassins, and just treasure in general. But that's the basic plot, is that he's just a pirate who really wants to get rich. You know, what I actually really like about this plot is just like how simple it starts. And I like how in the end it's really just about Edward getting some money. He's a pirate through and through, and that's pretty excellent. I think the plot is actually quite engaging and is much better than anything in Assassin's Creed 3. I think Edward is a good protagonist also. He has a lot of character growth and general development, which is a huge plus. He is quite good and one of the better assassins, honestly, and I wish we got to see more of him down the line because I actually really like him. Everything related to the story was pretty excellent, I must say. It wasn't as good as Assassin's Creed 2, of course, but it was pretty close, to be honest. I still really liked it, and the ending is actually really conclusive and good. It is the plot that you give a crap about because the modern day stuff is just so bad, so bad. So Assassin's Creed 4, when it comes to gameplay, is actually pretty different from the typical format. There is actually 3 general types of gameplay: on foot, on your ship, and his tablet guide. Let's start with on foot. Edward can do everything that the previous assassins could do, but he has a few more gadgets at his disposal. He has more guns in terms of numbers, not variety. He has a bunch of flintlocks on him, and you can shoot a bunch of your guns. The game has it like a third-person shooter now, as opposed to that clunky system in AC3 with over-the-shoulder shooting. You get other gadgets such as tranquilizers, rope darts that allow you to hang people. You of course have the hidden blades, and Edward has 2 cutlasses. All of his gadgets are pretty awesome, and I think they all make fine additions to the gameplay. The combat is basically the same as Assassin's Creed 3, as it's a bit more streamlined. You can pretty much always go on an execution spree, and it's as flashy as ever. I actually think the combat is better than Assassin's Creed 3. I think it might be the best in the entire series, actually, to be fair. The amount of tools you get just makes it so much more engaging, and it isn't just constantly counter, counter, counter. But by and large, it's exactly the same. The same goes for the parkour. It's exactly the same as it was before, even with all the forest stuff as well. It's exactly the same. Hold down right trigger, occasionally press A, and it feels and plays exactly the same. Thank you. And thank you for keeping the controls the same, finally. But all that fancy forest parkouring, yeah, Edward can do it too, not just Connor. Speaking of forest, the environments are totally different from the previous games, like totally different. The game has tons, and I mean tons, to explore and see in terms of places and environments. The game is a huge, massive open world after all. There are many cities, islands, atolls, rocky areas, and forests to investigate and check out, with tons of stuff to collect as well. This really brings into the whole ship gameplay now. So let's talk about that. So in Assassin's Creed 3 they introduced the ship mechanic, but AC4 really doubles down on it, and I would say around half the game is spent on the ship and half is on foot. The ship is a bit different from before. You shoot cannons with multiple types of ammo now. You can use the swivel by aiming up the shot by holding down usually Y. You can drop barrels behind you. You can change your speed, and this also affects how well you turn. There are other aspects to take into consideration, like storms, giant waves, tornadoes, and of course other ships. The main thing you'll be doing in the ship is either exploring the area, which is really just going around and checking out everything, or getting into ship battles. These are just epic, to say the least, and all of them are really fun, with tons of ways to take these ships down, and these battles are definitely the most engaging part of the game. I particularly really like all of them, actually, and think all battles, big or small, are just really fun on the ship. Once you're about to destroy a ship, you can actually choose to board it and take it over. You see, all ships have resources. Now if you board the ship and take it over, you get all the resources. However, if you just totally sink the ship, you only get half the resources, but you do save a bit of time. These resources are used to make money and further upgrade the ship. These upgrades are essential to making it through the game, like cannons, defense, ramming, strength, etc. You even use a spyglass to see what resources are on what ship. But upgrading the ship is one of the most important parts of the game. and that's why you really want to engage in the naval combat. Also, it's like actually just really fun to just go around totally wrecking ships and just being a pirate. The entire open world is available almost right off the start. The intro is very short, especially compared to AC3, and you can explore the entire map right from the get-go. However, I will say that while you can explore all of it, you really should not immediately, because you will get annihilated by these really high-level ships until you have upgraded your ship a bunch. Like, when I say this game world is huge, I mean it's absolutely massive. It's actually the biggest Assassin's Creed game ever made. It's even bigger than Odyssey, but only by a tiny bit. No other Assassin's Creed game has actually ever been this big, and it shows. There is a ton of stuff to do in this game. First, there are the main missions, of course. These are a lot more standard to Assassin's Creed, where it's usually tail someone, kill someone, and sometimes you even do that in the boat, or a lot of the time it's the ship battles. But it's fair to say that most of the main missions involve you tailing someone. But for the side content, there's also a bunch of stuff, just like the other ones. There's the assassin missions, which are as stock as they get for this series. There are the naval missions, which is where you're actually destroying ships or collecting resources and giving them to someone. There are these forts to take down to lower control of the waters in that area. There are taverns to recruit pirates and get drunk. Yes, recruiting returns from Brotherhood and Revelations. You send your ships off now to go do trades and help out in other areas. These are a bit scaled back from Brotherhood, but they're cool nonetheless, and I'm glad they have come back. You can no longer summon them for help in battle though, but it really makes sense as you're on tiny little islands most of the time. You not only upgrade the ship a bunch, but you can upgrade Edward as well in a Far Cry style. You go hunting for animals, and you hunt animals and you get their pelts to make better gear, like more health, ability to hold more ammo, tons of stuff to upgrade, more than just the ship. Sometimes it's larger animals and you actually have to throw spears and chase them down, like these whales, which are pretty cool. Yeah, you can actually go whaling. You can even go diving for treasure, which is a brand new mechanic where you're swimming around, which is decent enough, I think. You still go to high points for synchronization, which is useful, and it tells you where all the collectibles are. There are a decent amount of collectibles in this game. There's treasure chests to find with money, Abstergo collectibles, and yeah, those are in every Assassin's Creed. There's treasure maps, there's the Mayan armor pieces, and there's these small puzzles to get them. Oh, and there's sea shanties for your pirates to sing on the open water. These are like the pages from AC3 and Fly Away, though, so be quick. There's a ton of stuff to actually collect in this game. It's pretty crazy. It's actually way more than half the game than any of the other games. That's without mentioning the half dozen legendary ships to get annihilated by, or the Templar hunts for these like super keys. Like, when I say there's a lot, or like a ton, I mean there's like an ass ton of stuff to do in this game. It's quite overwhelming and is probably a completionist's nightmare almost. There is just tons to do. Like, let's take it back for a second, because there are a few times you do play as tablet man or woman. Well, this is extremely basic gameplay with a tiny puzzle or two to solve, or you're just generally walking around pressing B on the controller and listening to exposition. That's really it, and like the story for it, it's crap. You just want to go back to being a pirate. So go back and have fun exploring the open world, because there is so much to see and do. I really think rushing through the game and just doing the main missions is a big disservice to yourself as well, as a lot of the side content, while it might be repeated, it's actually pretty fun. A lot of people have called Assassin's Creed 4 the best pirate game ever made, and it's really easy to see why. You really are like a pirate. So now we talk about the presentation and the performance of the game, since we're done with the gameplay. So the graphics for the game were good. They weren't exactly mind-blowing or anything, but they looked good. The textures and the land all looked decent enough and was well enough. The water in the game looked really good, like really good, which is good because that needs to look good. You're looking at it a lot. The characters all looked decent enough. No one looked bad, but I didn't think anyone looked particularly amazing. It was just all good. It felt like a decent step up from Assassin's Creed 3, but not a huge leap for the next generation of consoles. The animation was also pretty decent, probably just the same animations as before though, to be honest. The frame rate was quite inconsistent, to be honest, and let me go into depth on why. This leads into the performance as well. This game, man, I don't know what was entirely wrong with it, but the PC port was not very good, or at least my experience with it on the PC was really lackluster. It seemed due to me having an ultra-wide resolution messing everything up, causing my frame rate to dip, causing lots of screen tearing. It wasn't a pleasant time in the performance area. I more than meet all the requirements, and I can play the newer Assassin's Creed games fine on my computer. This game, though, had some issues. I had some frame rate problems, screen tearing, all sorts of graphical glitches and issues. And some of those glitches weren't just graphical, might I add. Most of the glitches were graphical, though. Now, for the sound, I will say it was quite good. The music in the gameplay, it wasn't generic crap, I thought. It was actually good, which is a huge plus. It was all good, with some memorable tracks. Nothing amazing, but it was fine. The voice acting, I thought it was excellent, with all the voice actors doing a really good job, especially with the accents and all that. I really got no issues there with the voice acting. Killing people sounded as satisfying as I expected to be. And lastly, there are the sea shanties. You see your crew sing shanties while on the open water, and these are the highlight of the presentation in general. I love these. These are just wonderful, like all of them. They add charm, and they just add life into this super serious game for the most part. It's all good. The sound was really quite well. It was really done. It was good as a whole, and much better than the PC performance that just seems bad, or the just good graphics. The sound, excellent. But this leads me into the fun part of the review where I can roast the game, right? Well, not so much. Of course, there are glitches in this Assassin's Creed game, like I mentioned. Wow, that really won't ever die. The free running was not perfect again, and sometimes you would just totally lose control of your character or accidentally run up something that you didn't mean to run up. The precision platforming is pretty difficult in this game. Some of the cliff sides are extremely annoying to climb. It's really finicky and really imprecise for the most part. But none of this is new to Assassin's Creed. I've been complaining about these exact issues since day one. It's just so many games now that I've been complaining about it, and it's kind of getting on my nerves. Speaking of getting on my nerves, let's get into the obvious issue with Assassin's Creed 4, the tailing. There is so much tailing in this game, it is ridiculous. Now, in the previous Assassin's Creed games, there were a fair amount of tailing missions, but there wasn't too many, to be honest, and even looking back, I think it was at most, maybe a third of the missions in Assassin's Creed games. Usually even like a quarter of the missions in an Assassin's Creed game were tailing. However, Black Flag just goes out of control. Like, actually out of control, where it's basically every other or almost every single mission in the main story, it's a tailing mission. You even do it in the ship multiple times. You just follow them, and they go like as slow as possible, and they throw in eavesdropping with them as well, where you gotta stay in the area to hear them. Yeah, the stealth has actually been quite improved over the last couple games, and it's actually moderately decent and is better, but it's forced upon you so much. Like, it is just forced upon you so many times. Like, the tailing is just not exciting in this game or fun. It's just lazy. Like, I am not exaggerating when I say at least half of the main missions involve you tailing someone, because it really is that prevalent in the game. It's not fun. It gets old really fast. Sure, the first couple times you were like, yeah, this is okay, I guess. I'm going to learn about who I'm going to kill or whatever. But try that the 15th, no, the 20th time where you're tailing someone. It gets really old, and you just get really sick of it. I'm so tired of following these people around so slowly, listening to everything they say and trying not to get spotted. Like, it doesn't matter how decent the stealth is, because it is decent, I might add. You're just doing this so many times. It's like, I just want to kill him. And sometimes it doesn't even make any sense why you don't kill him. In the ship, it's even worse, because you just want to blow them up, but instead you're following them. And it's like, how can you follow them in a ship and they don't notice? It's just annoying in every sense of the word. It really is my biggest issue with the game, is there is just so much, there's just so much diversity in this game. And even in the previous Assassin's Creed games, there was way more diversity in the missions. And we're just left with the tailing missions, and occasionally assassinating, and a decent amount of ship stuff. But everything I thought was pretty fun, except this tailing. And you know what? There's more tailing missions than any other mission type in the game. And something that I did complain about in the previous games was the side content, which was really not exciting, worth your time, or even appealing, especially in AC3. But I feel like that's not the case here at all, actually. I think most of Black Flag's side content is actually appealing and exciting, of course. Of course, some of it isn't. like the best. Like collecting all these collectibles, getting the sea shanties is hella annoying because they fly away, and some of the general assassination missions are just kind of boring. But I will say some of the naval missions and taking down the forts, like a lot of it is pretty fun. And like I think some of the side content in this game is actually some of the best side content in the entire franchise. But that's really it for negatives with this game. There isn't a laundry list of issues. It's really just honestly standard Assassin's Creed issues at this point, and way too much tailing. Like the obvious glitches, performance issues, controls, it's all very standard to Assassin's Creed. Other than that though, this game is actually pretty excellent, and it's a pretty big step up from the last couple Assassin's Creed games, I'll be honest. It's a lot of people's favorite Assassin's Creed games along with 2, and I would have to say that I'm actually in that camp as well. I actually think that along with Assassin's Creed 2, this is probably the best Assassin's Creed, at least so far, that I've played in the series. It's actually pretty excellent. It really adds a bunch of new exciting stuff that is all engaging, and it is a wonderful pirate game, that is for sure. Now, what some people don't like is the lack of focus on assassinations, the Templar stuff, and I think it honestly really makes for a diverse game, especially looking at the series as a whole, and I really appreciate how diverse this game was, especially from the other Assassin's Creed games. The game is also like long, and it's really massive with a ton to do, like I've said a number of times. I put well over 20 hours into the game, and my final completion was only in the upper 50%. It took me around 10 hours to get that in Brotherhood and Revelation, so this game is easily triple its size. Like easily, you could well spend over 50 hours if you wanted to 100% this game, and you'd probably have a blast doing it, as you'd be checking out every island, taking all the ships down. It'd be pretty fun, except those tailing missions. Can those like get out of here, like seriously, for good? But I don't have time to 100% it, so sorry. In conclusion, Assassin's Creed 4 is a fantastic game, and I think it should actually be checked out by anyone, honestly. Even if you don't have any interest in Assassin's Creed, like, you could easily start here. It's a really good starting point. If you like pirates, you probably already played this. It's a must-buy. It's a must-play. I will say, though, I do recommend the console version more. It seems that this PC version is just not very good. So I recommend the console version now. It's pretty cheap, also, and it's highly regarded for being just the best pirate game like ever made. And it's because of how great its mechanics are, the pirating theme is, like the story. Like Ubisoft themselves actually are making their own pirate game without Assassin's Creed now, because they just know how popular this game is and how great of a pirate game it is. It's called Skull and Bones, and I will maybe check it out, but it's going to be just basically Assassin's Creed 4 but multiplayer, which is it was a huge hit. This game was a huge hit, and for good reason. I think it's pretty fantastic, and I had a great time with the game. Now, after Assassin's Creed 4, we would get 2 Assassin's Creed games the next year, but before that, we would actually get Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry, a standalone expansion to Assassin's Creed 4, which I'll look at very briefly. You play as Adewale, who was Captain Edward's quartermaster in AC4, and he joins the assassins later in the game to stop slavery. Spoilers. Whoops. Well, this expansion is well after the main game and sees Adewale doing just that, trying to free slaves and stop these evil oppressors. The story is actually really dark, and it's short as it is. There's some really messed up stuff in this game about human rights, lines of dialogue, and it would make anyone in 2019 just cringe. The story, it was pretty good, and I think it gets its point across really well despite how short it is. Ade is fine for what he does in the game, and he's cool to play as. So Freedom Cry doesn't really change all that much from the main game. Ade is the same as Edward, only instead of 2 swords, he is a cleaver. Instead of flintlocks, he gets a blunderbuss. That's pretty cool, actually. The map is pretty scaled down as a whole, with there only being 1 real city in the game. Everything else is little atolls or plantations. But you can still free roam if you want. You can do the main missions and help the slaves. That's it. The main missions also have you freeing slaves, tailing someone, being stealthy, or killing people. It's pretty much the same as Assassin's Creed 4, with the tailing again. Lots of tailing. Freeing the slaves is required at 1 or 2 points in the story also, so you just go save them in the open world. To save them, you basically just have to kill the slavers. That's it. It's a bit basic, honestly, but what did you expect? This is just a little expansion, and it's actually DLC for the game if you want to buy it as that. Ship gameplay returns, but is much less prevalent in here with much less to do, like a lot less to do. You can save slaves here, which is in the same manner of just killing the slavers, but you have to board their ship to kill them. But that's the general gameplay. It's the same as Assassin's Creed 4, but much more scaled down, and the only collectible is treasure chests. Ade is basically identical to Edward minus a few tiny changes, and the graphics are identical to AC4. I have nothing to state that hasn't already been said earlier in this review. It's identical to Assassin's Creed 4. It's good, but not amazing. The performance is exactly the same and is quite underwhelming and bad. The sound was similar as well, only there was a lot more tribal songs. That's for sure. Those were good. It was unique music, that's for sure. There was nothing really bad, and the voice acting was what you would expect with good accents and all that. There just really isn't anything to say about the presentation as a whole. It's the same as Assassin's Creed 4 for the most part. And that's the general feeling I got with this game, is that there just isn't much to say at all. I debated whether or not to even review it because I didn't look at any of the other DLCs in this series, but this was the only DLC that was actually released as a standalone in the series. It's the only one that's ever been released as a standalone, so I figured it was worth it. My main issue with the game is that it's like 2 hours long. That's really it, and I've seen people 100% the game in literally less than 2 hours. There just isn't much to this game. It's over like that. You beat it in one sitting easily. At least tailing doesn't really get old in it, I guess. I will say there is one stealth mission in the game that is actually really hard, and it can be frustrating due to the controls not responding in tense situations. Other than that, though, the game really doesn't do that much. The game is fine for what it is. It's another Assassin's Creed. If you like Black Flag, you're gonna like this one. It adds more Black Flag and a blunderbuss, which is pretty cool. But really, only at 2 hours, it's probably not even worth playing unless you're like a serious Assassin's Creed fan. There is really no reason to play this. It doesn't add too much, it's pretty short, and it means nothing in the grand scheme of things. So there you go. Make with that what you will. I thought it would just be an interesting tidbit kind of mini review to bring up, but the series would definitely go on to bigger and better things from here on out. So here is arguably the most unknown Assassin's Creed game. In fact, it's so unknown I didn't even give it its own review, and it's Assassin's Creed Rogue, definitely the most unknown in the main series. This game was literally set up for failure, as Ubisoft barely marketed the game and released it on the same day as Assassin's Creed Unity, and it was only on 360 and PS3, not even PC at launch. It was for people who hadn't moved on to the new consoles yet, and Unity, well, it took all the attention, for better or for worse. So this game fell by the wayside immediately, and nobody played it when it came out. Then it came to PC, and here we are several years later, and it's finally out on Xbox One and PS4. So now it's on like everything. Still unknown though. Assassin's Creed Rogue takes place in between Assassin's Creed 3 and 4 in the historical setting. There is some modern day part with Tablet Man, but this is more of a joke than anything else. Seriously, it's nothing. There's nothing important. It's just about seeing if the protagonist is marketable. I'm not even going to go into any more about the modern day stuff. It's crap. So like I said, in between 3 and 4, you play as Shay, an Irish assassin who has just been accepted into the ranks. Well, he gets tasked to find an artifact in the middle of a city. He finds the artifact, and well, an earthquake happens, destroying everything, killing thousands. Naturally, Shay is like, what the hell? Hell? And finds out that the Creed wanted this. They wanted him to get the artifact and were very aware that this could happen. And so he tries to defect from the Creed. He thinks that what the Creed did was horrible, and then they try to kill him. However, he survives the attempted murder, and after an in-game year or so, he fully joins the Templars in stopping the assassins from getting these pieces of Eden, causing all these earthquakes, killing people. Yeah, you primarily play as a Templar in this game. You are the bad guy, the antagonist. However, this game, I will say, does a really good job actually at setting it up. Like, they do a really good job painting the assassins as the enemy, really. It's their fault all this bad stuff is happening. It's not Shay's fault this earthquake happened. It's the assassins. They told you to go get the piece of Eden. And Shay honestly doesn't feel like a villain at all. He feels horrible about everything. He feels bad about all the people that he basically killed. He feels bad about betraying the assassins. He feels bad for wanting to kill the assassins. But he just wants to help everyone and save the world. His words, not mine. He's actually a really good protagonist, I think. In fact, I think the whole story is actually quite good throughout. It has decent pacing, and I really just like the whole dynamic of being a Templar. It's really interesting, and I think it's decently fleshed out, and the ending is actually pretty good. Yes, the ending of the game is actually really good, and I'm gonna be honest, it's one of the best endings to any Assassin's Creed game. It's really good. In general, I think the plot of the game is honestly a bit underrated, which seems to be a common theme with the game. So now that we're done with the plot, it's time to look at the gameplay. Many people have basically said this is an expansion to Assassin's Creed 4, and you know what? Those people are very much right. This game is very similar to Black Flag on many levels. The controls are the same, the weapons are the same, except they add a couple. Many elements are exactly the same, such as the ship gameplay, which is in full force again. The movement system is exactly the same. The combat is exactly the same with a couple tweaks here or there. The setting of the game is really interesting, actually. It's in New York, and I guess like the northern Atlantic Ocean in the ice, and then further in America in these rivers. It's really strange, but it's a decent amount of locations, but these maps, I'll just be honest, are pretty small and are nothing compared to Black Flag's massive map. Like all of these combined, and it's not even half the size of Black Flag's map. There's no giant open sea either. A majority of these areas are really confined. In fact, New York is strictly land, actually, and it's here where it's very similar to Assassin's Creed 3. The setting feels like a mishmash of other Assassin's Creed games with a tiny bit new in it, but it's nothing huge. So what is new to the game that isn't carried over from Black Flag? Well, I can tell you what hasn't changed in the slightest. That's the parkouring, the free running. There's no change at all from what I could tell. When it comes to on-foot combat, they have added a bit. The blow darts have been replaced with an air rifle, which does the exact same thing. You can have sleeping or berserker darts. Later, it also becomes a grenade launcher, which is pretty cool. In hand-to-hand combat, there is nothing changed at all, except you can do double counters again, which is like Batman Arkham. The enemies themselves are actually really different to fight. You're fighting assassins, so when you go into stealth, instead of putting your hood on, you put your collar up. Kinda silly. You fight hooded figures who use assassins' techniques like hiding in a bush or falling on you to assassinate you, and I think this adds another layer of depth to the game, but it at least mixes it up. In general, the combat is nearly identical, like I said. The ship combat has a few differences. You'll be traversing in rivers a lot, first off, so there's a lot more narrower instances. In addition to that, instead of the fire barrels, you actually shoot oil out and then light that on fire. There is an actual ramming mechanic where you get a speed boost to ram into another ship. The swivel is now a pickle gun, which allows for continuous fire. That's pretty cool. And a big addition is the icebergs. These get in the way on a decently consistent basis and can be destroyed with cannons or ramming into them. A huge wave will even come from them. But these icebergs get in the way and they must be destroyed. Other than that, though, I can say it's essentially the same as Black Flag, actually. The ship upgrades are the same, the character upgrades are the same. There's definitely the less emphasis on the ship combat in this game compared to AC4. In general, it's not focused on the ship as much. It's still really good. It's just, if you like Assassin's Creed 4, you're gonna like this. The notoriety system, something I think I forgot to mention in AC4, is exactly the same with the mercenaries coming for you. However, now they can actually board your ship, which is pretty cool. But that's it for new gameplay additions, really. How about the missions? Well, I'll be honest, again, it's basically the same as before. However, I will immediately say there is very little tailing in this game. So much less tailing. Thank you. There is more destroying something, killing someone, or ship combat in the game. Only now you're a Templar, so you're blowing up assassins, you're stalking assassins, and it's pretty neat. This leads us to the side content of Rogue. So Rogue got rid of some of the side content from 4. You can't swim in the water most of the game because the water's so cold it will hurt Shay, so some of the side stuff was removed because of that. Assassin missions are obviously gone instead. They're gone. Instead, you actually kill birds that you intercept with the assassin missions, which is a cool twist. You kill the bird before the assassin mission gets to the assassin. I like it. The naval missions return, and they're basically the same as before, collecting stuff or taking ships down. You can still send ships out on missions like before, but there's really not much to this. The main side content, I'll be honest, is the collectibles. This game adds a number of side collectibles to the series, like Templar specific stuff, like these books, these drawings. There is a ton of collectibles. Like, I thought there was a ton in Black Flag, but we're talking like 6 or 7 different types of collectibles in this game. I honestly lost count. There were so many. Shanties, chests, animus fragments, books, treasure maps, bottles, notes, drawings, like on the notes, viewpoints, and I'm pretty sure I'm still missing some still. There is just a ton. Like, what the hell? So needless to say, the game is a bit similar to Assassin's Creed 4 in a lot of ways. But now let's look at the presentation. The presentation in this game is just okay. It's not anything better than that. It's not anything worse than that, though. I played the game on PC just like all the other games before, and I know in fact the PC version does look a bit better than the PS3 and 360 version, and I think the remaster on Xbox One and PS4 is on par with the PC version. It doesn't look that bad for the consoles it was released on. It just looks outdated from the fact that it was on previous gen consoles. Like, if you say this game came out in 2014, you're gonna get, well, that game doesn't look very good. But it was developed for the 360, so with that in mind, I think the game looks fine, and it looks on par with Black Flag, which I thought looked pretty good. This just looks alright. Many assets and parts of the game are clearly taken from Black Flag as well, and these look fine, but like I said, it's just alright. I actually didn't really encounter like any screen tearing, which is unusual. I usually have tons of screen tearing in these games, but not this one, which was nice. Kind of jarring, but thank you. All the character models were good, not great. I mean, they were just really alright. I thought even Black Flag had better models than this game, to be honest. They just lack a certain level of detail in it that I feel Black Flag had. The animation was generally fine. I didn't really see any issues with it. Still pretty smooth for the most part. The lighting, for some reason, is just really bad and really off. The shadows are just really poor, and I think the lighting in general is just, it doesn't look realistic in the slightest. It just doesn't even look anywhere near as good as Black Flag's. I don't know what was going on here, but the lighting was not good at all. The frame rate was fine. It's always a plus. Water looks pretty good. Black Flag is definitely better in the water department, though. I can say at least the snow and ice looks pretty good. There wasn't any of that in Black Flag. When it comes to the performance of the game, it was pretty spot on, actually. I thought it was good. It didn't support my resolution, but there was a fan-made patch which did. And it took about 1 minute to install, so thank you. But other than that, the PC port was pretty spot on. I don't really have any issues. Lots of detailing options, all that nice stuff. It was generally well optimized. No complaints here. The presentation, like I said, at its best, it's okay. At its worst, it looks worse than Black Flag. There's literally nothing special here. When it comes to the sound, it's again nothing special. The sound effects are basically all reused from the previous game, like the assets, which, I mean, I kind of expected that, and these are fine. Music, unfortunately, really forgettable, was generic crap. Nothing stood out, nothing was special. The music, it was nothing. I really don't have anything, honestly, to comment on for the music. I don't remember a single tune. Yeah, I don't remember. The shanties return where the pirates sing. Oh, these are fantastic. These are fantastic, of course. They added some new ones, and they're all really good. They're definitely the highlight of the whole sound department. The voice acting was alright. Everyone was trying, of course, but it really just came off as just alright. No one was particularly striking. Shay is a somewhat inconsistent accent, I noticed. I don't really know what's going on with that. He was probably the best voice actor, though. Everyone else was not amazing. They were just kind of passable. It was fine. It was just a kind of generic AAA game, but then this game wasn't even a AAA game. It was kind of budget when it came out. There's just nothing to comment on, really. Something there is to comment on, though, for this game is the complaints. Yeah, we're already at that part. What is wrong with Rogue? Well, the obvious complaint would be that it doesn't really add anything from Black Flag, but I don't see that as a negative, really. This game is not a full-blown sequel. It's just kind of another game. It doesn't try to reinvent the wheel or add a ton of stuff. It uses the established formula, and that's it. If you're someone who did not really like Black Flag, you're going to hate this game. You're going to just hate it. If you really like Black Flag, you're gonna like it. So I actually really like this game. I don't really have a problem with the game not adding anything more. Black Flag is good for me. I think what it does add is decent little additions, and I appreciate it. My biggest issue with the game is its length and side content. The side content in Rogue is just bad. There's no going around it. It's just bad. This is a very common theme in Assassin's Creed, but it's again bad here. The naval missions are decent enough. Intercepting the pigeons is cool, but there are just way too many collectibles. Like I said, like, the collectibles are out of control. Like 40% of your overall completion rate is literally just collectibles. There's way too much here, and there's really little to no incentive to get any of them. So I just didn't care about any of them, to be honest. Like, they aren't the worst collectibles ever, but they certainly aren't enticing. It just feels quite lazy, actually. Instead of actually making side content, they just put a bunch of stupid collectibles that have never shown up in any of the games again. Like, why are these here? I mean, even the game gives up on trying to show every collectible you're tracking, and it literally just says collectibles. In Black Flag, it would show you all the collectibles in an area, not just the word collectible. That's how many there are. This leads into my second issue, which is the length of the game. It's really, really short, especially for an Assassin's Creed game. It's actually the shortest Assassin's Creed game ever made. My overall synchronization was around 50-something%, and it took me about 7 hours to do that. However, getting 100% will not take 14 hours. It would probably take around 11 or 12, because again, it's mostly the collectibles. So yeah, it's a short game, and I kind of wish it was longer due to its interesting premise and the few gameplay additions it provides. But in conclusion, is this a bad game? No. But it's not a great game. It's just good. It's not very long, and I'm going to say the name again for the 50th time. It's like Black Flag. If you took a shot every time I said Black Flag in this review, you'd be dead by now. But it's a nice little addition that definitely wraps up the saga of Assassin's Creed. It ties up some loose ends in between 3 and 4. In the end, this game, to be honest, was basically unnecessary, and that shows in its length that it was probably rushed and not needed like at all and was just kind of a cash grab. But I did have a nice time with the game, to be fair. I had a nice time. Honestly, if you have any interest in the game, I see no reason why you shouldn't check it out. Just be aware of its length, its collectibles. It's pretty cheap now. I got it pretty cheap. It's on all platforms now. It's definitely one of the more interesting marks, though, in Assassin's Creed history, where you play as the Templar. And after this, it seems Ubisoft would go on to bigger and better things with Assassin's Creed Unity and leave the Black Flag formula behind. I say bigger and better things, but you guys know what I mean. Oh boy, here we are with the Assassin's Creed that really turned some heads, that's for sure, not in a good way. No, this is the Assassin's Creed where it showed Ubisoft was just, well, out of control and pulled the big greed out. So Assassin's Creed Unity was released in 2014 to not only mixed opinions from critics, but it was generally hated by most people that played it, including myself. I got it when it came out and was like, what is this crap, and didn't pick it up again until this marathon, in hopes of it being a bit better. So AC Unity technically has two plots, the story of Arno in the French Revolution and some weird initiate in modern day. So I'll be honest, this initiate thing in modern day doesn't make like any sense at all. You're an initiate in the assassin ranks and are trying to find some sage or something that was in Arno's memories. This plot, it literally goes nowhere at all and doesn't even have a conclusive ending. It's just awful. But to be honest, it barely shows up like at all in the entire game. So there is that. Like, there's seriously like 2 cutscenes. So if this game doesn't want to act like it exists, I won't either. So the real story is the story of Arno. You see Arno as a kid, actually, initially, where he's waiting for his dad to come back from an errand. He meets this other little girl named Elise, though, and the two play around for a bit. However, after that, Arno finds his father dead. Many, many years later, Arno finds himself just kind of messing around getting in trouble. Well, Elise is throwing a big party. She's much older now, obviously. And Arno, for some reason, isn't invited, so he sneaks in to see Elise. Well, after some smooching, Arno heads out. However, he sees his father figure, the guy who took care of him since his real father died. Well, he sees him get murdered. He runs to aid him and the guards show up. Naturally, he just gets blamed, of course, for this and is thrown in prison. Well, here in the prison, he meets an assassin who calls him Piss Pot, and then the French Revolution starts, actually. Well, he's able to escape prison due to all the commotion. Here he joins the assassins and goes on a redemption quest, really, while, of course, meeting up with Elise. The story in Unity is actually, it's pretty alright. It's not amazing, but I feel it's good, at least. Arno is a decent protagonist. He, of course, is nowhere near as good as Edward or Ezio. but he's okay. He isn't terrible or dull, and he has a decent amount of character development. It's not a lot, but there is some. Elise is pretty excellent, I feel. I really like her motivations and her character. I'd argue she's probably better than Arno, to be honest, but the dynamic the two have is really good when they're together. Like, I think it's the best part of the whole story is when they're together. I will say also the historical set pieces are also really good, but the story of Arno with Elise is definitely my favorite part. So while it does take a little bit of time to get going, it is good. The only reason I would say it's not like great or even really good is because the ending. The ending is just terrible. Like, it is just borderline abrupt and is just not good, I think. I think it's one of the worst, if not the worst ending of the series, actually. Like, I was not a fan of this at all. It was just bad. It came out of nowhere. So besides that, the story was just alright, really. It could have been so much better, but I'll just say that. But now it's time to talk about Unity in terms of gameplay. So Assassin's Creed Unity looked at how Assassin's Creed was really changing. There was all the ship combat, exploration, and so what. And Ubisoft decided to actually go back to how it used to be instead of moving forward. So Unity tries to go back to how AC2 and Brotherhood were. The game is obviously in France, so the entire game is in giant cities like the older games. There's no big open world like 3 or 4. There's no ship combat at all here either. This game has of course got a massive open world, but it's mostly in these crowded streets. So the game tries to go back to how the previous games had in terms of most mechanics. The free running has been changed though. The free running is slower and more realistic. What I'm saying is the game tries to add some weight to Arno to make it feel like you're parkouring more, and it feels a lot more tight than the previous couple games. It's more like methodical, I guess. I'll just say that. They've tried to make it more methodical by adding a run over or slide under feature. What I mean by this is you hold right trigger and then you press like a certain button to run up a piece of architecture, or you can hold down another button to slide under it. However, I will say this honestly rarely happens in the entire game. It's a new addition, but it really doesn't do anything. Now, a new addition that is actually really helpful that has been in every Assassin's Creed after this is when you're going down a building. They've made it really easy. In previous games, you had to awkwardly go down and hope you don't die. In this game, you literally just hold B and Arno automatically goes down for you. It's really helpful. It's a great addition to the free running, and it's probably the only good new addition to the free running. Anyway, besides the free running and climbing, what else is there? Of course, there's the combat. The combat has changed a bit from the last couple games. Well, it seems to have regressed, to be honest, back to the older Assassin's Creed games. You see, the entire execution system that was introduced like 4 games back is totally gone. Enemies are rocking life bars again. You also have to actually drain them of their health. There's no one-shot move unless you kill them in stealth. They got rid of stunning enemies. You can parry, attack, and charge up the attack. You can use guns again, however, it seems they've changed a little bit. They're not as seamless as it was before. I don't know why they would change that. There's more weapons at least than the flintlock though. There's a new weapon known as the Phantom Blade, which silently shoots out an arrow. It's kind of like a crossbow. It's cool, I guess. Now, while the old Assassin's Creed games had a couple weapons to fight with, Unity goes like out of control. Like, just there are tons of weapons to fight with in this game. Like, actually tons. Like a couple dozen. Sure, they all function pretty much the same, but you have tons of options. You can have a Morning Star mace, you can have a cleaver, you can have a basic sword, a katana. There is tons of stuff on offer. Same goes for the guns, tons of weapons. But the combat is much slower than it's been in the last couple games, and when you get swarmed by enemies, it's just all bad. You just can't kill them all really quickly, and they'll just shoot at you and you will die pretty quick. I guess the next part to mention is the stealth, which has been reworked a bit. The game puts the focus back on giant crowd covering everything up, something that the last couple games definitely abandoned. I mean, I don't even think I brought up hiding in the crowd in AC4. You just don't really do it. In this one, yeah, no, they went back to it. I mean, in the game there are these huge, and I mean massive crowds, the biggest in the series easily, and these are your primary hiding spots. There is hay, of course, and then there's also the crowds, and I actually think going back to social stealth is pretty cool. And it's cool to be in such large crowds, way larger than the old Assassin's Creed games, killing people and then hiding in the crowd. There is no notoriety system anymore. Once you're spotted, it's break line of sight and then stay hidden for like 30 seconds and they go away. Definitely simplified, a lot easier than Assassin's Creed 4's bounty hunters. You also only have one hidden blade, but you can still do double assassinations with the skill. So smooth transition here, guys. This game introduced skills to Assassin's Creed. Yes, by doing missions you can get skill points and money. Money can be used for consumables like lockpicks, health items, because Arno doesn't regenerate health. You have to go and get an item again, or ammo. In addition, you can buy gear and weapons with this money. The skill points are used for skills, obviously. These skills can range from stuff that should be available at the beginning of the game and stuff that is useful. Stuff like double assassinations or ledge kills, or better lockpicking. It is kind of annoying that you have to get these skills when they should have been here from the start, but you can obtain them pretty fast, to be honest. Either way, it wasn't terrible, but it does seem very half-heartedly implemented. So that is everything surrounding Arno. They added customization with the purchasable gear and skills while still changing up the free-running, stealth, and combat again. But what are you doing in this large open world with all this? Well, it's what you would expect, to be honest. It's a huge open world with so many optional objectives you can't even see the map anymore. There is the main missions, of course, which usually have you assassinating someone or getting info from them. Something I will say right off the bat is you do not tail targets very much. It happens only a few times in the game. And thank you. I do not want it in the games very much at all anymore. Now, the assassinations have been changed up. They've tried to make it more like Hitman, where there are opportunities to assassinate people. They made a number of ways to kill your target, which is pretty cool. Sure, you could run in there and just kill them, but the opportunities they present you are much cooler, I assure you. These are some of the best assassinations in the whole series, honestly. There are tons of side missions on this map, which involve errands, side missions, murder mysteries, and it's like Batman Arkham, honestly. And then lastly, there's a couple collectibles, of course, in the game, chests, tokens, and of course climbing high stuff, synchronization, yeah. The main side objective that was pushed for this game is the new co-op side missions. Now, I remember when this came out, it was a bit hype, but it very quickly died out, and the only people who play it now are completionists, and you never actually have to do co-op once, so no one's playing it anymore, or at least when I was playing it, nobody was playing it anymore, so no comment there. It's also quite lame that it's only 4 dudes you have. There's literally no females. Chat for another time, though. But that's the general gameplay for Unity. If you couldn't tell, they've really tried to make it more like 2, to be honest, and added in a bunch of collectibles. But now on to the graphics and the performance. Okay, the graphics are a mixed bag. They're a mixed bag for one big reason. You see, sometimes they can be fantastic. You see, when everything is working in the graphics department, the game does look fantastic. The models all look great there. There's a stunning amount of detail. The amount of models that they can be put on screen rivals Dynasty Warriors, and they don't look like crap like in Dynasty Warriors. The textures are awesome. The rooftops look great. The animation is extremely fluid. However, this is when it all works. It's pretty infamous now that Unity really is just broken to the code in terms of graphical glitches and just glitches in general. When it comes to graphical glitches, there's clipping everywhere, there's models floating all over the place, they're walking through stuff, the frame rate is dropping all the time for no good reason. In fact, the frame rate was just bad. It just dropped a bunch throughout the entire game. I've seen it on the most powerful of computers, and the frame rate still drops, so it's just in the game's code. It just can't handle it. There would never be another Assassin's Creed to have this many NPCs on screen because the engine can clearly just not handle it. The frame rate just dies because of it, especially when you throw down like a smoke bomb. The biggest issue I would say with the graphics is the rendering. Many times nothing is rendering and it just looks like crap. It looks like a Crayola crayon. It's just not rendering. And it's not just the textures, like the models too. There's all these graphical glitches with the models where they're just floating eyeballs and brain. Like, there's just so many graphical issues, but like I said, when everything works, it looks great. It's just it doesn't work most of the time, and a majority of the time, you'll be running around with everything rendering basically in front of you. Additionally, hair just looks awful. No idea why. Also, the loading times are just strangely long. Like, they're just long. And lastly, like every other Assassin's Creed game, they got screen tearing on my monitor with this game. So that is why it's a mixed bag. And it will never get any more fixed than it is now, that's for sure. The sound was moderately underwhelming. The sound effects were just not very good. Usually in most reviews I'm just like, the sound effects are fine, but not here. They just felt extremely underwhelming. Stabbing people just didn't feel that great, and in general, I just thought they were kind of there, and sometimes they kind of weren't there. Yeah, I had many sound glitches as well, where the sound effects just cut out entirely so many times than it should have. Like, there were just glitches in the sound department also. The music was pretty much crap. It was just generic. I don't remember a single theme or track. I thought it was all underwhelming, not very good, don't remember any of it, just no, bad. The only good part of the sound actually is the voice acting, but I think the voice acting, it might be alright, but there's one big issue with that. Everyone is British. Yeah, this is in France, but everyone's British, and Ubisoft themselves are French, so I don't know what they're doing. This seemed like an easy one. They have commented on this and said it was too hard to understand French people, but still, it's really jarring that everyone is not in the right accent, like, at all. And sure, it was fine, but again, wrong accent. Well, now that I'm just talking about all these issues already, I'm just gonna say it right off the bat. We're gonna go on to more issues from here. So the first thing I'm gonna say is the obvious one that I've already brought up basically. There is just tons of bugs, glitches, crashes. It's all over the place. It's nowhere near as bad as when it launched, but it's still pretty bad, and it's one of the buggiest games I've ever played. This is not new to Assassin's Creed. There's always been bugs in the whole series, but this is just out of control. I don't know how it can get any worse than this though. So my first gameplay issue is the lockpicking. The lockpicking is just not very good at all. Assassin's Creed 3 had it, and it was bad then, but it was pretty much optional. And here it's not, and I feel like it's even worse. It's just so not engaging, can be overly difficult if you don't level it up, and it's just silly. Like, just get me away from this lockpicking, it's not good. My next issue is definitely my biggest issue with the game. Like, easily my biggest issue with the game. Bigger than all the glitches and the little lockpicking, it's the controls. The controls in Assassin's Creed Unity, I think, are just horrible. This game, it adds a couple good things, like I mentioned, like holding down B to just go down buildings automatically, or even the slide under jump over option. It could have been worse, but these are arguably the worst controls in the entire series. It's just as bad as Assassin's Creed 1. Honestly, worse, because that was the first game. That game gets an excuse. That was the first Assassin's Creed. This is not. This game gets no excuse, and I think all of its glitches help make the controls that bad. Where do I even begin? I think first I'll begin with the fact that for some reason they tried adding weight to Arno. Yeah, they just made him purposely sluggish and just heavier. You can't do all the crazy stuff you were doing in the last couple games because he isn't anywhere near as fast because they added this weight to him. They tried to make it more like methodical and it's just slower. But it just doesn't work. It comes off extremely sluggish. Like, I just feel like Arno takes forever to do anything sometimes in this game. Like, when you jump rooftop to rooftop, it feels like Arno has to confirm that you're going to jump off. Like, you're just trying to jump off a rooftop to another one, and you just end up mashing the A button to jump off because he's like confirming, oh, are you sure? And it just feels really sluggish. It's entirely just so sluggish, and you get just this slow feeling, and it exemplifies the control issues like that I had in the previous Assassin's Creed games because of how slow it is. Doing any precise platforming where you need to specifically go on a certain ledge or hang from a certain spot is just incredibly frustrating. Arno, it seems, will jump literally everywhere but where you want him to be, and I was frequently pulling my hair out during the stealth seconds because Arno will just not go where I want him to, like, at all. The issues of where you're trying to chase someone down, you accidentally run up a wall or climb up something, or you didn't mean to do something, are just further exasperated because of how sluggish it all feels. It just feels extremely unrefined and just totally rough. I feel like a decent amount of the issues with the controls though are from the glitches though, because the controls also, they just glitched out, and Arno himself is just glitching out, and he's just trying to do what you want, but he just won't. I think the controls are just garbage, to be honest. They're just garbage. They just don't work all the time, and it seems like they didn't work more than they actually did. This brings me to my next part of the issue, the combat. The combat is easily the worst combat in the entire series. I am not kidding. I think it's dog crap. The same sluggish, slow, rough feel you get from the controls is on full display with the combat here. Arno just moves so slowly when he goes to attack, and it's just frustrating. The entire speed of Arno just ruins the controls. I think Arno is the slowest assassin ever. I'm not even kidding. The controls are just extremely jank. It feels like you're moving in slow-mo. Some of the enemies are just extremely obnoxious and can block literally like everything, and the only way to get them is to parry them, so you just end up waiting for them, making it even slower. Shooting them in this game is just incredibly slow, as this game doesn't truly go third person anymore, and it's just as jank as it was in AC3. As if it wasn't slow enough, some of these enemies have such good armor or so much health that it takes seemingly forever to kill one. I frequently found myself going to just die instead, because I'd rather just die than have to hit them 20 times to kill them. Like, it's just tedious. It's extremely tedious. I'd rather just die and retry the level than fight the guards. Maybe it's just my patience is not what it used to be, especially with this being like the 7th game I'm on now, but I've lost track at this point. Who's counting? But to say that I was annoyed is a major understatement, especially once I got to later in the game. And I kept upgrading my gear and I kept getting better. The weapons kept getting better. I got better armor, more skills. I wasn't doing anything wrong here. The only thing I wasn't doing was spending microtransactions to get better weapons that were just borderline overpowered. Oh yeah, let me go into those. There's microtransactions, but you can buy in-game money to use on weapons and armor and all that stuff. So you can just buy the best stuff if you really want to. Basically, some of the weapons cost so much money that there is basically almost no way to get these weapons without spending real money. Like, you can buy property again, but you don't get like any money from what you'd get in Brotherhood and like Revelations. You get a fraction of what you would get there. So getting the best weapon, you're gonna have to either grind for literally hours upon hours, or you're just gonna spend a couple bucks here or there. Like, what the hell? This is a single player game with some co-op elements. Like, grind hella long to get the best weapon or spend money? Are you kidding me? Next on the list, Arno's severely gimped compared to previous assassins. Not only does he suck at killing people, he can't do executions and he's hella slow, but he only has one hidden blade. Like, are you kidding me? One? He only has one gun also? Like, really? Really? In Black Flag you could have 4. Then my biggest issue is they got rid of the ability to grab like ledges when falling. Like, this is the biggest issue for Arno being gimped. Why? Literally, when you're falling, you can't grab the ledge, you just fall. Even the original game had this. Why would you get rid of it? If you get shot while climbing something, you just fall all the way down. You can't grab the ledge. Why? This is so asinine. And this leads me to my final point on Assassin's Creed Unity. This one doesn't have to do with the controls, it doesn't have to do with the glitches or even spending real money. No, it's the side content. The side content in Unity is some of the most cookie cutter, basic, repetitive side content in any of Ubisoft's games in the last 10 years. I am not kidding. Instead of all the fun you had exploring Black Flag, doing some interesting side missions, or even any interesting at all assassination missions, or sending out your cronies to do the dirty work, no. That is not in the game. There are no interesting side missions really in this game. They are just repetitive, annoying, uninspired. They just feel so boring. They just don't feel like real content. It just feels like side content that they added. Except for the murder mysteries. I'm gonna give that one a pass. I think these are okay. But everything else is just bad. They even added these seemingly random encounters you have where you help civilians, but I think it was cool like the first couple times, but try that the 30th or 40th time, I'm like, no, I'm sick of this. I just started ignoring them, honestly. I had no desire to do it. It just feels like all the side content is literally not genuine in the slightest. I think it rivals Assassin's Creed 3 in terms of just garbage side content, if not worse. There is so much of it, like it covers the entire map. It's ridiculous. But you know what? This entire argument about the side content can be chalked up to, that's side content. You don't have to do any of it. I tried it, I hated it, and I didn't do anymore. And so I didn't have to, and so I didn't. The end. You don't even have to do these. I'm gonna just stick to the main missions, which I will argue are pretty okay for the most part. There are some missions that are not so great, but a majority of them, especially the assassination missions, like I mentioned, they're actually pretty good, and they're definitely the highlight in this whole game. It's like all the effort went into these assassination missions and nothing else. And that's the general consensus online, is that this game could have been great, but in the end, it's not. I really believe it could have been great as well, but due to all the issues I mentioned with the controls, the glitches, the bad combat, I don't think this is a good game. I would say it rivals Assassin's Creed 3 in poor quality. It sucks. Do I think it's worse than Assassin's Creed 3? Yeah, I really do. Ultimately, this game feels incredibly complacent, to be honest, with its borderline repetitive structure. I really could not recommend this game to anyone, not even the most die-hard Assassin's Creed fans, but to be honest, they've probably already played this game. But if not, stay the hell away from this game. There's no reason to play it at all. It means nothing in the overall story of Assassin's Creed. It's not a very good game at all. It was definitely not fun because of the controls alone. It took me around 12 hours to beat, but I've seen people do it in about 7 or 8 though, so it really varies. But either way, I don't think it was worth any of that time. They tried to make it like Assassin's Creed 2 so much, but in the end I'd say just go play Assassin's Creed 2. It's a much better game. It's way better than this game could ever try to be. And there's a reason this game is like the most hated game in the whole community. It's easily the biggest blunder in Assassin's Creed history. It doesn't get any worse than this game, in the main games, I might add. Like, everybody took their turns laughing at Ubisoft with this one. Now it's my turn. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. In fact, this game was such a blunder that Ubisoft released free DLC for the game as a public apology for this game being such a disaster. I tried it, and while the DLC takes place after that horrible ending and has Arno messing with some piece of Eden, and you know what, Ubisoft? I don't want your freaking handout. I want a better game. So I didn't bother with this DLC. I was so sick of this game. And then recently, the game actually went free for like 2 weeks because of the burning of Notre Dame, which is horrible, might I add. And so now a bunch of people are able to play the game for free. And you know what, for free, I guess it's alright, but I mean, like I said, I don't want your stupid handout, Ubisoft. I want Notre Dame back, or I want a better game. So here we are with the last traditional Assassin's Creed, and that would be Syndicate, released in 2015. The gaming community kind of groaned when it came out, and there was little excitement for it even after release, and in terms of sales, it is one of the worst selling games in the series. But here we are. So Assassin's Creed Syndicate takes place in Victoria, London in 1868. It stars 2 protagonists, actually, the Fry twins, Jacob and Evie Fry. These 2 twins actually start in the Brotherhood. There's no introduction to that. I mean, this is the 10th game in the series. Do we really need another introduction to the Brotherhood? Anyway, the 2 of them are actually really fed up with what has happened to England. They're on the end of the Second Industrial Revolution, really, and the place is borderline oppressed. It's all oppressed by a man named Storied. Well, he is the big bad who is just ruining the place. There is also this new piece of Eden that has shown up, so the Fry twins are on it. Jacob wants to build up a gang to fight Storied, and Evie wants to find the piece of Eden. The story sounds pretty basic for an Assassin's Creed game, and for the most part it is. There isn't anything super complex or anything here that it all is confusing or different. It's pretty straightforward. That's not a bad thing, it's just straightforward. It's at least easy to follow. The Fry twins are pretty good together. On their own, I'm not too huge on them. I think they're just like average at best, annoying at worst. But together, I think they have decent chemistry, and I think it makes for an overall decent story. Honestly, the best part of the story is probably the antagonist, who is consistent throughout. He's just an asshole and really makes sure he gets his point across. He can also be a bit crazy and reminds me of other Ubisoft villains, especially from Far Cry. But this guy is nowhere near as good as those antagonists. But he definitely is different from most villains in the series. Honestly, he saves the story from just being completely forgettable to actually being alright. I'm not going to say the plot is amazing or anything, but there have been worse plots in past games. Ultimately, it's just alright. I just don't feel it's incredibly engaging in conjunction with the Fry twins being just alright. So on to the gameplay of Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which is a little different from the previous couple games. Yes, of course, it's still a large open world filled with tons to do and things to collect, but some stuff is a little different. First off is you can switch protagonists whenever you want, unless the mission specifies which one you will be. Jacob and Evie do have some differences as well. The parkouring, free running has been changed again, a little. The running under over thing in Unity, it's just gone. It's just completely gone. It's done automatically again. You just hold B to go down buildings also. Like, that's the same, which was a good thing, I might add. You just hold B. But the other thing is that you hold the right trigger down and go. I will say immediately the controls are a lot better than Unity. It is less rough and it's just more refined, and it was much better than Unity in the controls department. And the combat, I gotta say, is totally changed from Unity. It is a lot faster, it's less sluggish, and ultimately more satisfying. The game uses a much more brawler style of gameplay, similar to Batman Arkham games. You're still mashing the X button to punch as fast as you can, but it is a lot faster, and there are actual combos to be done in the game. There's not as many weapons as the previous game, but they're all much more refined. You can have your brass knuckles, you can have a cane sword, and even a curved knife. It all feels much better to use than the previous games, and that there are combos, it definitely helps. In fact, many of the combos can be executed, and you can nearly one-shot enemies with them, actually. This is really helpful, as the enemies still have life bars and will not die in one hit very often. You do have guns, which is much more improved from Unity and are more similar to Black Flag, but they don't insta-kill either, really. The throwing blades do, though, for some reason. Unless, of course, you use them in stealth, then they're gonna kill in one hit. And the stealth in this game is pretty much the same as the last game. The crouching is definitely better. It's still not normal crouching like a Batman Arkham game or even Splinter Cell, another Ubisoft game, but it's not downright sloppy like it was in Unity. Other than that, though, it's pretty much the same. Kill them when they don't see you. For some reason, you again only have one blade, and when it comes to getting detected, like, all you have to do is break their line of sight for a certain period of time and get out of the investigation area. It's pretty standard, and then you'll be hidden again. The stealth, it's still not amazing, but it is a slight improvement. Slight. And now, when it comes to moving around as a whole, there has been one nice addition, a new addition, a grappling hook rope launcher thing. Yes, you get a grappling hook, and it's greatly appreciated. You can scale buildings hella fast with this thing. You can use it to get away to far away parts really quickly as well, because a lot of the buildings are too far apart in this game. You cannot just parkour like a normal Assassin's Creed game. So this thing is actually really helpful, and it actually feels like a good addition. It's a fine addition to the series, I might add. Now to talk about this large open world. Assassin's Creed Syndicate is massive, like much bigger than Unity, with a ton of stuff to do and ways to get around. With such a big map, how are you going to get around it? There are trains and carriages. Trains you just ride, and the Fry Twins base actually happens to be on a train, which is cool. The carriages you get to drive. These control like standard vehicles in an open world game. Right trigger to go forward and left trigger to go back, etc. You can even drift with these, and you can perform some Mad Max style car combat where you slam into the other carriages. There are some chase sequences where you do chase after people in the carriages and slamming into them, and you know what, these are mildly different from the norm. Now in the large Assassin's Creed world, there is tons of Assassin's Creed missions and side missions and collectibles and the usual stuff. And these are pretty similar to the last couple games. The main missions usually involve you getting information from someone, tailing someone, retrieving something, helping someone, and of course assassinating someone. The assassination missions are easily the highlight of the game. Most of the main missions are pretty standard for Assassin's Creed, to be honest, not offering too much variety from previous games, but there is enough from the fact that there's trains, there's drivable carriages, and the grapple gun thing. The assassin missions take a much more Hitman style approach, where there's a bunch of opportunities to actually kill them, or you could just be hella boring and just stick a blade in them. They introduced this idea in Unity, and I thought it was a good idea then, but these are just much better, and they really carry the main missions and really prevent them from being mundane. How are you actually able to do these opportunities is totally up to you. You could of course kill them the old-fashioned way, but I really recommend you don't do that because it's just kind of boring, and you won't get the perfect synchronization that adds up to your 100% completion if you care about that. The side missions are, again, like, what do you expect at this point? Like, some side missions are from certain characters throughout the story, some famous, some not. I don't really have much to comment on, as I didn't do a bunch of these. Like, they're about as standard as you would expect from a Ubisoft open world game. The collectibles in this game, though, they're just borderline out of control in this game. It's not that there's tons of different collectibles. In fact, there's only two. There are these chest tokens and these strange little pickups here or there, like it depends on the district or whatever. And I'll be honest, the chests and tokens sucked in Unity, and they really suck here. There's probably over 500 total collectibles in this game, and that's just way too much. Like, what the hell? The chests not only give you money, but they actually give you crafting material as well. More on that in a minute. These collectibles are legit, like, everywhere in the game. The last main part of the open world is the oppression. So not only does the main antagonist own the industries, he owns the gangs as well, which are known as the Templar Blighters. Well, they own territory on the map. In fact, the entire map when you start. So like Far Cry, you have to free the areas from their control. To free an area, all you have to do is some small little side missions. These are pretty basic, like just kill a guy in charge or all the enemies in an area. They take maybe at the most a few minutes. Like they're very short and quick. Once you clear out a district, then you have to take on the mob boss for it. But to be honest, the bosses in this game really are just take more of a beating than a regular enemy. That's it. They don't do anything interesting other than that. But that's what you'll be doing most of the time, is liberating the map, completing missions, doing some cool assassinations, and all the collectibles are still way too abundant. And you know, everything you do in this game gets you XP. Yes, they bring XP back, but it's better than Unity. There is a huge skill tree again. Now, some skills are actually exclusive to Evie and Jacob, but to be honest, it's only a few and it's not even that important. These skills add a little bit more to the game, but aren't absolutely needed like some of Unity's. In addition to this, there is crafting. They brought in the crafting from Assassin's Creed 4, but now it's for weapons and gear. The awful microtransactions are gone, at least. You can actually afford to make these weapons and this gear. This is actually vital in the game because the enemies get much more powerful throughout the game, and the higher your level, like, it doesn't affect the amount of damage you do. Your weapons affect how much damage you do. You can craft better weapons at higher levels, balancing out it a bit. But it's pretty basic, to be honest. And that's the general gameplay for Syndicate. There's no multiplayer at all this time, and no stupid freemium app. Good. Get it out of here. Well, after explaining what you'll be doing in this game, though, does it really sound that different? No, not really. There are some tweaks here or there, but it sounds pretty similar. More on that in a bit. So now we come to the presentation. Assassin's Creed Syndicate is not much of a step up from Unity, really. Unity actually did look pretty good for when it came out, so improving the graphics wasn't a big deal here. It looks maybe slightly better, but only slightly. They are nowhere near as many models as before, and because of that, the frame rate is much better. In fact, that's the first thing I'm going to say about the graphics, is that the frame rate is fine. It's not garbage like it was in Unity. It ran moderately fine. I still had a bit of screen tearing, but that's normal for an Assassin's Creed game at this point. It's still annoying, but whatever. The models in this game they actually look pretty decent to good. They aren't absolutely amazing or anything, but they all look good. The facial animations are all good as well. They just look good. One issue I have, though, a serious issue with them, is their lack of variety. Like, what the hell? Like, this is a AAA game, and there's maybe like a dozen models for regular random NPCs. You'll see the same, like, 5 models all over the map, and it just gets so old, like this big bald brute. Like, he's literally everywhere. Like, come on, it's just lazy. I really hate this, actually, because it's like, again, this is a AAA developer. This is the modern age. It's like, really? So while the models are decent, like, the lack of variety hurts them greatly. The textures were all good, and the city as a whole looks pretty nice. Again, it's not stunning or anything, but it looks good, especially for an open world game. The lighting was also pretty average. When it comes to the sound, it was generally fine as well. The sound effects, honestly, were pretty basic. They didn't stand out or have anything worth mentioning, really. So anyway, the music was actually good. I thought it was actually really representative of the times, and I really liked it, actually. It wasn't the most catchy or amazing music, of course, but I thought it fit in really well, so there's that, at least. I thought it stood out really well, especially compared to some of the previous games, so there's that. But again, it wasn't amazing. The voice acting was not the best. It was just, at its very best, alright, but again, not that great. The main characters and the antagonists were good. Again, not amazing, and the accents were pretty on point at least, but everyone else was just bad. The Fry twins were easily the best, and they were just good. So, like, as a whole, I just don't really have that much to say about the voice acting. It's just alright, like, the sound in general. It's like, it's not that bad, it's not that good either, though. It's just kind of average, and it just kind of evens out. So, while I might have talked about some of the alright stuff with this game, I think it's time to go into the complaints with Syndicate. My first issue is an actual gameplay issue. It's not even a gameplay issue. I just wasn't really sure where to put this, but I guess here's as good as any. There's an attempt at some real-life storytelling, or the modern-day storytelling in this game. There's no gameplay here, actually. It's just a couple of cutscenes. However, these honestly just make, like, no sense and are totally out of place. I think it would have been better without these, but... And you don't ever actually partake in them, so there's that at least. It's just these made, like, no sense, and I thought they honestly detracted the game more than anything else. But, speaking of gameplay issues, I have a bit. Let's start off. First, you only have one hidden blade again. Like, why? Like, this is well after Assassin's Creed 2, when you had the ability to have two. Why is there only one? It makes little to no sense. Next is the controls. This is nothing new. This is like the 9th, 10th, whatever game, and we still have control issues. It's still not perfect. You run up walls accidentally, it's imprecise, it's hard to turn sometimes, there's some issues here and there. It's a step better than Unity, it's less sluggish than Unity. When making very particular and precise jumps, it's still quite difficult, to be honest. Ugh. My biggest issue with the controls is jumping off stuff. No, we aren't talking jumping off the eagle view spots that are again present in every freaking Assassin's Creed game. Those are fine. I'm talking about just making simple jumps off some buildings. Sometimes, in fact a lot of the times, the character just won't jump off. He just stands there looking like a dumbass, or she, and then you just gotta hold B and climb down, and it's like, dude, just jump off the building. I don't know why, but jumping off just doesn't work a lot of the time. It's not every time, it's just a lot of the time. Now, my next issue really is a large one. It's a large one that really encompasses the whole game. Now, you see, a majority of the game as a whole is pretty alright. The combat, it's alright. The stealth, it's alright. Even the presentation, it's alright. But you see, there is where the problem lies. It's just alright. In a series as grand as Assassin's Creed, alright at this stage just doesn't really cut it, to be honest. It doesn't cut it. Because it's just alright, this game comes off as stale. That is the best word to describe the game in terms of negatives. It's stale. Maybe this is because I played so many games back to back to back to back, but the general consensus online and with the community seems to be that the game is stale. The formula has just really gotten dragged out at this point, and to be honest, I'm tired of it. This game has no actual, like, humongous faults or flaws. Like, there's nothing inherently awful or bad about the game. I just got kind of bored playing it. I felt very little desire to even touch the side content, and I just kind of wanted the game to end, and that's never a good feeling. Of course, this did not come immediately. I did not feel fatigue immediately. It was around the 10-hour mark where I was just like, yeah, I've seen this and done this before, way too many other times, like 8, 9 times, whatever it is at this extent. And the game does have some nuances and differences to be different from the other games, but there just isn't enough change, I feel. Sure, there's the carriages and that Mad Max style combat or the grappling hook, but it doesn't really matter in the end. It just feels extremely similar to the previous games in a bad way. The side content really just was not engaging in the slightest, which has been a very common complaint with Assassin's Creed, and it's only worse here. It's just not interesting. The collectibles, like I said, there's just way too many chests and these tokens, way too many. See, it's like the combat is good, but it's not great. And honestly, just like the rest of the game, it gets stale, it gets repetitive, and it just gets borderline boring. Almost all the fights go exactly the same way, with you just smashing X as fast as you can, do the occasional combo, or just pulling out a gun. The main missions with the assassinations honestly really help out, and they're the only interesting missions in the game. I will say, they do actually force you to take control of half the map to beat the game, which I thought was just incredibly needless padding. on a game that was already getting repetitive. Like, really? You're gonna make me actually do the taking over the outpost kind of missions, or like not even missions, just like side objective. Like, don't get me wrong, there's a ton to do in this game. It took me around 20 hours to beat the game, and I think I was around the 50% mark, but I was just totally done by that time. I was just really tired of it. The game just doesn't really do anything that we haven't seen before, and what it does do new is very sparingly, honestly. Like, it's even the grappling hook and the car combat, if you can even call it that, not even cars, the carriage combat, it just gets dragged out and gets old. I just felt so much fatigue while playing through this game, and I was just really struggling, honestly, to complete some of these missions. Even getting to this review has been kind of just difficult because I've just been not feeling it, just fatigued by it. And maybe it's shocking that it took me this long to actually get kind of sick of the formula after playing like 9 or 10 Assassin's Creed games in a row, but I really just think that this game, all in all, is just kind of boring. Hey though, it's better than Unity. Wow, congrats. It's better than the worst game in the series. Yay. I mean, that's not very impressive, to be honest. The game does some things well, but to be honest, the other games in the series just did it way better. And while there's nothing actually substantially wrong with Unity, Syndicate. Unity, there's a lot wrong. Well, there's not a lot actually substantially wrong with Syndicate. It just comes off as extremely tired. The aging gameplay really did lose its novelty quite quickly, or at least it did for me in this game. I'm certain not everyone feels this way about the game, but that seems to be the general consensus, is that people just kind of dropped off with Assassin's Creed with this game. It was like, I've been there, done that like 9 times before, and it really just set in when I was playing this game. I was just feeling mad fatigue, and that's really my final thoughts on the game as a whole. It has a lot of good parts to it, don't get me wrong, but as a whole, I just felt generally uninterested with the game, and finishing it was a bit of a slog. It was decently long, has some good stuff to it, but I think that this is one of the most forgettable games in the series, if not the most, next to Rogue. With that said, only super fans should even think about playing this game, because they're the only ones who are probably going to even really like it, and they've probably already played the game by now. So, my recommendation, take it for what you will. But that's it for this video. The game's boring. So here we are with the next Assassin's Creed. So Assassin's Creed Origins is significant and is not just another Assassin's Creed. No, it's more than that. It's significant because it was the first game in nearly a decade to not come a year after the previous Assassin's Creed game. In 2016, Ubisoft gave the series a break and instead had their next game pushed back a year to make sure it was up to snuff, and they felt that there was quite some stagnation with the previous Assassin's Creed game Syndicate, and dwindling sales further prove this. So they decided to give the game a year off, basically. They decided to give the series a whole year off to just come back bigger and stronger than ever, and make something different from the previous games. Not only did they make something different, they actually made the origin story for Assassin's Creed in general. So let's get into it. Assassin's Creed Origins has 2 storylines to it. One in modern day and then the actual storyline. The modern day storyline actually does have a character for you to play as named Layla, who is a researcher for Abstergo Industries. She has been tasked with finding an artifact in Egypt. Well, she ends up finding a tomb, I guess, with the oldest assassins ever. She then takes advantage of this opportunity to relive their memories with an animus she has just apparently made. She wants to get into their program. Let's just say they don't exactly like this. There is actually more to the modern day plot. Yes, there is actual development to an extent here. There is actually something attempted here, at least. They have more plot progression in this game than like the last 4 games combined. There is something here. Is it any good? No, not really, to be honest. I mean, it comes off as just too vague and very basic for the most part, with a very predictable plot twist. But they tried something different, or at least tried something, at least, so that's a step in the right direction. I guess that's a win. The ending, though, is pretty bad. They also confirm Watch Dogs is actually canon to Assassin's Creed and are in the same universe, but that's the modern day stuff. Nobody really cares about that. The real story is the story of Bayek. The game takes place in 49 BCE in Egypt and the surrounding area. Bayek is a Medjay for his little town of people. Basically, he is like the guardian for the town. Well, one day he is with his son, just having a nice day, when he actually gets abducted. He gets abducted by these really strange men and women in masks, known as the Order. They're trying to get into this vault that is in Bayek's little town. They expect Bayek would know how to get in since he's a Medjay. Well, they have his son as well. But Bayek is able to get free thanks to his son. However, when struggling with the guards, Bayek inadvertently stabs his son, killing him actually. The Order give up and just leave Bayek. The actual game takes place 1 year later. Bayek is still the Medjay, haunted by his past. He meets up with his wife Aya, and the two determine that they must put a stop to this Order and these evil masked men and women they want to put their son to proper rest, and the only way they can do this is by properly avenging him. The Order would of course go on to be the Templar Order, and Aya along with Bayek are the first assassins, starting this whole feud that would span for an eternity. The story, I'll be honest, is actually good. The beginning is really strong, and I feel that you feel bad for Bayek. Yeah, it really shows that Assassin's Creed needs someone close to the protagonist to die to give more motivation to the assassins, but I think it's probably the best handled death since Ezio's family. It makes you feel for Bayek, and you really want revenge on these masked people. And they're just grade A scum as well. They aren't just trash. I think the plot develops really well in this game, and the way that it actually intertwines historical figures and they're brought in, I think is actually excellent. I would argue this is the strongest plot in a while for Assassin's Creed actually, and the ending was actually quite good, if not a little sad. One reason it is so good is Bayek. He really makes the story good actually, and I was a fan of him. I think he's the best protagonist since Edward in AC4, with the only other protagonist being anywhere near as close as him as Shay in Assassin's Creed Rogue. He's just endearing, really. And he has his heart in the right place. He's also not stupid. He can see the ruse that does end up happening near the end of the game. His wife Aya is good also. She's not as good as him and mostly plays off him, but she is strong and one of, if not the strongest female character probably in Assassin's Creed, like as a franchise. Overall, I'm going to say the story is quite good. I actually liked it on almost all fronts. Now, the gameplay is actually a bit different from the previous 10 games, so maybe I won't sound incredibly repetitive, and maybe the sky will rain blood. Assassin's Creed Origins is an open-world action stealth game with a bunch of RPG aspects now. In fact, I would say it's on the cusp of being an action RPG. Let us start with how we always do in these reviews, going over the assassin. So Bayek is very versatile in this game, as someone usually is in Assassin's Creed. You no longer actually have to hold right trigger to go into free running mode. Bayek just moves at a decent pace the whole time. You just hold X or A or whatever it's mapped to on your controller, and you can just jump up stuff, you can climb up stuff. You just hold circle or B, whatever it is on your controller, to climb down stuff with the feature from Syndicate returning, and Unity actually. The parkouring and climbing has really been as streamlined as possible. It's much easier to traverse and navigate because of it. Sure, it's a lot slower, but it just feels better. Bayek has a crouch mode that is similar to, say, Unity or Syndicates, but it's much better than those. It's really fluid and feels like an actual stealth game, to be honest. Bayek can hide in just about everything, it seems. Tall grass, flower patches, even swamps, etc. So in the previous, 9-10 games at this point, you would just press a button and everything would get highlighted for you through Eagle Vision. It was very similar to Batman Arkham, how it was in the previous games. However, I must say that it's not only Eagle Vision in Assassin's Creed Origins, it's actually a real eagle now. Like, it's legit. The eagle from Far Cry Primal has crossed over, and this is your new Eagle Vision. What you knew in the past is gone. It flies up high above and will never get attacked. You can use it to spot guards, main missions, objectives, treasure, pretty much everything. I actually like this and think it's a good change of pace from just pressing Y or triangle to just see everything like the previous games, like it was Batman Arkham. You now have to fly around to see everything. It's also in real time, so make sure Bayek is hidden. So one of the biggest changes to the game is the combat. The combat is completely different from anything in the series before. The game takes on a much more Dark Souls Witcher style of combat. Use the triggers and shoulder buttons to do left, light, and heavy attacks first off. Like Dark Souls. You can shield with the left bumper also. You can lock onto enemies by pushing in the right analog stick. In previous Assassin's Creed games, it was the paired animation system, meaning you could only attack one enemy at a time, but only one enemy could attack you at a time. Not anymore. This game uses frame data like Dark Souls and Witcher. Multiple enemies will attack you at once, and you can attack multiple enemies at once as well. It's pretty different, especially from the last couple games. There's even a rage mode, which usually gives you a super attack that just straight up goes through blocks. But yes, there is dodging, like strafing around enemies, blocking, and even parrying here. It's a lot more in depth. There's also the range combat. You just hold the left trigger down and Bayek goes into third-person shooter mode with his bow and arrow. It is identical to Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor. It is really snappy and is quite excellent, actually. It just feels really good again. It hadn't felt honestly this good since Black Flag. The shooting was very subpar in the last couple games. When it comes to weapons, Bayek has a few to use. He has swords, shields, the usual. He can have dual daggers, maybe a big club or a sickle, and some other little variants. There are also different types of bows and arrows, like a standard one, a hunting one, a shotgun-like one that fires like 5 arrows at once, all using their own arrow types. The variety is good here for the weapons. The stealth has also been reworked a little. They added the Far Cry style of detection with the little like pointer line that shows where the guard detecting you is. The AI will go investigate if a certain level of detection is reached, and when you're spotted, they go into kill mode. It's similar to the previous games, but I'll be honest, I thought the stealth here was some of the best stealth in the series. Sure, it's identical to Far Cry basically, or to an extent, but I've always honestly thought Far Cry had better stealth than Assassin's Creed, which is kinda sad. So now they just implemented Far Cry stealth into Assassin's Creed, which was a good choice, I feel. Well, that's what Bayek can do. He's quite different from the previous protagonists, and in pretty much all cases for the better. Anyway, on to the next huge change for the series, the way the game is structured. The game has gone from the usual Ubisoft open world kind of game to a more RPG style of game like Witcher 3. The game is quests now as opposed to just missions. These quests are of course linear scenarios with objectives. Besides that, there is a huge open world to explore in the game, and I mean huge open world, and I mean explore. The minimap has been nuked in favor of a Skyrim looking overhead compass thing first off. And of course, climbing up the tall thing in an area will uncover a large part of the map for you and tell you what there is to explore in the area. But it's pretty fun, to be honest. The world is set up for exploration as opposed to you just being in a big world for the sake of being big. You can freely roam the world, and I mean the whole world, but it comes at a caveat. The game introduces real levels to the series. Sure, the previous games had leveling up and skill points, but it wasn't anywhere near this level. So Bayek has a level now. Obviously, to level up, you need XP. You get XP from basically everything, exploring new areas, killing enemies, and completing quests. Whenever you level up, you do more damage and get more health, in addition to receiving a skill point. These skill points are extremely helpful in the game and are basically essential now, or at least some of them are. It could be start a battle with rage mode, get more arrows, or even being able to control set arrows in the air. Now, while your current weapon may have stats to it like damage, you have a cap as to how much damage you can do at a certain level. What I'm basically saying is you can only do so much damage to enemies above your level. Of course, when you level up and attack lower level enemies, you will do more damage to them. When they are really low, you will just one-shot them actually. That's just how RPGs are. If you're 5 levels above the enemy, you're gonna like one-shot him. But if you attack an enemy, say 4 or 5 levels above you, you just aren't going to do like any damage to them. You won't be able to kill them if they're so many levels above you. So you have to be within, I'd say, 1 or 2 levels of the enemy to really fight them. So while the whole game might be open right from the get-go, you won't be able to do anything in most areas as the levels are much higher than you, meaning you will just be destroyed by the enemies in like 2 hits and you won't be able to do any damage to them. And you might go, well, that's only if I fight them, I'll just be stealthy. No, this applies to that as well. You can't actually one-shot much higher level enemies anymore. You'll just hurt them. And even if they're like 2 levels above you, you just can't one-shot them. It's kind of crazy to think about in Assassin's Creed that one-hit stealth kills don't exist anymore. So you'll be exploring the world in a set way, essentially, how the levels are set up. But of course, you won't be on foot the whole time. You have mounts to ride like a summonable camel and a horse. These are fine, and you can ride them anywhere you want, actually. When it comes to what you can find in the world besides the ego points, there's a bit. Of course, there's main and side quests, and then there are the collectibles. The way the game is structured is usually do the main quest, and the main quest will be a couple levels higher than the player, so they have to explore and do some side content to become a high enough level to do the main mission, or quest. it's really interchangeable. The main quests are usually assassination missions, occasionally tail someone like seriously like maybe 2 or 3 times in the game, or retrieving something. It's not the most varied from the previous games. I will say the super unique assassination missions from Unity and Syndicate really are no more. They're usually a more scripted kind of linear fight. These are more traditional certainly, but better than how the original Assassin's Creed games did it, I guess. It's different is what I'm saying. The side missions are usually a bit more basic. They often involve just one task, but sometimes go into 2 or 3 other tasks, but that's if they do an extension of the first task. It really depends on what you actually respond with. Usually, though, it's just helping someone retrieve something or killing alleged tax collectors. Now, when it comes to collectibles, Ubisoft thankfully turned it down a notch. There's not a million collectibles like some of the other games. It's just like a little treasure hidden in an area, and the eagle will even tell you where it is immediately. You don't have to do any searching for it. They even brought back the underwater exploration from AC4. All these tasks that I've mentioned, the missions, quests, whatever, eagle points, treasure, they all get you XP, and you'll need that to get through the game. The random events from Unity and Syndicate come back, but they now get you XP also, so it's kind of worth it to do these. Now to mention the crafting and the loot. I mentioned before the weapons of stats like attack, and they do. There is loot drops in the game, and they're for the most part randomized. Shields, weapons, and bows all have random loot drops. The loot drops seemed fine to me. I was getting good stuff every like 2 or so hours, sometimes faster. I'm really not sure what to say. I have little to no experience in loot games like Destiny. The only one I've honestly played is Borderlands, and I have played a lot of Borderlands. So ACOrigins was fine for me in the loot drops. Now you can craft better equipment, and it is just like Black Flag or Far Cry 3 through 5. You have to kill animals and collect materials to make better gear, stuff like stronger armor, hold more arrows, do a tiny bit more damage, etc. And good luck killing some of these animals. I swear, crocodiles and hippos are some of the most vile, evil creatures in this series so far. Do not take these things lightly. So the very last thing to mention in the game is the ship combat. Yes, it actually comes back. It's a little different because of the setting. You have people with fire arrows instead of cannons. You have fire bombs, and ramming really is like the best way to damage another ship. The controls are a bit different, but the ship combat is still good. It is honestly really brief, adding up to maybe, and I mean maybe, like an hour and a half. Maybe not even that, probably like an hour of gameplay. It's really nothing. It's barely in there. But it is cool that it's there. But that's the general gameplay for Assassin's Creed Origins. While it does have a few similar elements to the series, it changes quite a bit to make up a unique experience actually. It's different enough for me at least, because I was getting pretty tired of the old formula, and this one has enough tweaks to it to where it's different. So now it's time to talk about the presentation and the performance. So this is actually the only Assassin's Creed I've ever played through on console. I played it through on PS4 actually. I heard horror stories about the PC version and its DRM though. So I played through on a regular PS4, and I will say the frame rate was not amazing. Screen tearing and frame rate drops were abundant. The game ran at a nice 30 most of the time, but occasionally going to 60, but sometimes it would just drop super far down, and I mean it would just go low. It was pretty inconsistent as a whole. I got used to it, but it was a bit distracting, and initially it was just very jarring, so that wasn't perfect. There were a lot of graphical glitches as well, clipping bodies, ragdolling out like crazy. Actually, there was a good amount of clipping issues, but it really just wasn't that great. I'll just say it was nothing new to the series, because the whole series has always had clipping issues and ragdolling out like crazy, especially glitches. The models, though, as a whole, I thought were really good minus the glitches. I thought everyone looked really good, even the random NPCs. Everyone is modeled really well. Bayek is the best, of course. His level of detail is just pretty great. The animation is, again, wonderful on him, and I didn't think it looked stiff at all. In general, all the animation minus strafing looked good. Strafing just looks kind of dumb, but everything else looks pretty wonderful. I think the models, animation, it's all good. Now, when it comes to the environments and the lighting, it is excellent on all fronts. This is the best looking and best realized Egypt in a video game, period. Sorry, Serious Sam, but I mean, you're a little old now. No, it looks excellent. The water, foliage, sand, all excellent. Buildings, awesome. I love the setting, and it looks fantastic, really. The lighting was great too, with dynamic day-night cycle. It was just really good. It even has affects, like, it even affects the NPCs. Like, they have schedules and stuff. Some of them go to sleep at night or go pee at a certain hour. It's a really awesome level of detail. Ubisoft got that right, that's for sure. When it comes to sound, I'll be honest, it's not on a similar level. I'm not too big on it. The sound effects were mostly reused from previous games, and I know they were because I played through 10 of these games in about 2 months. I know what I'm talking about. Most of these sound effects, if not almost all of them, were reused. I mean, that's fine, but some new meaty sound effects could have been added. They were just okay. The music, I'll be honest, is just terrible in this game. Like, there was very little music in the game at all, actually, and what was there was just very basic. It was extremely basic, and that's okay if it's basic and catchy, but it wasn't even that. It was just generic, forgettable crap. Like, sorry, not sorry. I didn't think any of the music was good in this game, actually. I really hate how there is, like, no music in most of the game either. I'm exploring this big open world for hours on end with no music at all, really. Like, really? Except when I'm in combat. Then sometimes there's music. Like, really? I ended up playing my own music or listening to other reviews in the meantime because the lack of music was just so jarring and it made it feel so empty. I think they just blew it in that aspect. In Witcher 3, Final Fantasy 15, there was awesome music playing in the overworld. This just doesn't cut it at all. And then there's the voice acting. I'm mixed on the voice acting as a whole. I think most of it's good. A majority is pretty good. Of course, there is some of it that is just boring, and then anything from the side mission givers is just not very good. But the main characters have good voice acting. That's all good. My main issue, though, it really is the writing. I'm like the last person to complain about the writing in a video game, but I'm sorry. Just like, some of this just does not match up with when the game takes place at all. Like, at all. The accents are all on point, and they're all good. But some of the stuff they say that is basically modern day stuff just doesn't add up with the time period. When I hear a character goes that someone might be doing something sus, or I'm gonna light these fools up, I'm just like, okay, that is not what they were saying back then. That's not even close to what they were saying back then. But, as my historian friend has pointed out, they didn't actually speak English back then, so I guess he's got me there. I don't know, I just wasn't a fan of it. I just thought the writing was really odd and kind of poor. I just wasn't the biggest fan of the sound as a whole. Bayek was good, but his writing was questionable. Okay, so, well, it might seem I've gotten to all the negatives at this point. I might as well continue down this path. So while the game is good and changes a lot, like I mentioned, the game isn't perfect. My first issue is the glitches. Again, it's like a pretty standard complaint at this point, and that's all I'm going to say there. Next is that the load times in the game are really long. Like, there's usually not too many in the game, but when you first load up the game or die, these are like ridiculously long. Like upwards of a minute, maybe a minute and a half long. Like, that's just too long. The controls in this game, well, I'll be honest, these controls might actually be the best controls in the whole series. Yeah, wow, the streamlining like worked. I think the controls are great, actually. I had the least amount of issues when it came to this, especially compared to the previous games. I could probably count on one hand how many times I felt out of control with my character, and it was just actually super precise for the most part. No, it was actually really good. I'm kind of shocked that the controls were actually pretty good. The friendly AI in this game, not so good though. It's absolutely retarded for the most part and will just ruin any of your stealth runs. They will stay by you and get spotted immediately, causing the enemies to swarm you. They don't show up often, but they're totally stupid. It's better to just be gone with them. Legit. You can have your ride go into auto drive basically to your destination, but like the other AI, it's pretty retarded. It doesn't always go to your destination. Like, I don't know what's wrong with the animals, they just don't always go to the destination when you turn autopilot on, meaning you need to control them most of the time to get there. Or you'll get mixed results if you do otherwise. When it comes to the combat, the lock-on is a bit finicky, it's not perfect, and switching targets is a bit of a pain in the ass. My biggest issue with the combat is anything relating to the shield. I honestly like the combat for the most part, but I think it's different. It puts up a challenge for once and is fun, I will say that. But anything related to the shields in this game just suck. You see a lot of the enemies of attacks that cannot be shielded or parried, so you have to dodge. My issue is towards the middle and end of the game, like every attack is one of these attacks, meaning you just have to dodge or basically everything. Blocking and parrying is not really an option at all, it's just dodge. It just seems kind of stupid to even have a shield to begin with. It's just a waste, and parrying I thought was overly difficult, especially compared to like Sekiro, the new pairing game from Software. So Ubisoft would actually go on to get rid of shields in the next game also, so I think they knew that the shields suck in this game. My last complaint, gripe, negative, whatever, with the game is that it gets a little old by the end. You will have done most of the mission types by the end of the game and feel like you've seen everything there is to see. There is no overall completion rate either, so I have no idea how much I actually did. Ubisoft even has microtransactions to make it so you get XP to level up faster. Like you can just basically buy XP to beat the game faster. So wow, Ubisoft. You can really just buy XP to make the game go faster. And while I did think the game got old, I was never truly incentivized to buy this XP. I will say that. So it's not totally evil, but it is just kind of like a frown. All in all, Assassin's Creed Origins is probably the best Assassin's Creed game in a while, that's for sure. Yeah, I actually liked it quite a bit. It's not absolutely amazing because of the issues I mentioned, but it's actually good. It's sometimes great. I'd say it's probably the best Assassin's Creed really since 4. It has a good story and a good character. The gameplay adds enough stuff to it to be fun and engaging again. I didn't feel totally fatigued most of the game. And the game was longer than most of them. It took me around 24 hours to beat. It has some issues, like I mentioned, the glitches, the sound department, and just kind of getting old. But overall, I think it was a great open world game, and I think Ubisoft really kind of redeemed themselves here with this game. This game is actually worth your time, I think, for the most part. I can recommend this game to a lot more people than just the die-hard fans. I can recommend it to anyone who likes open world games or maybe played one of the old Assassin's Creeds and gave up on one of the newer ones. Try this one. You might like it. And you'll never accidentally run up a wall here. Hopefully. I think the controls again were pretty good. Regardless, this one might be worth your time. Or if you still hate Assassin's Creed after all these years, you'll probably hate this one. But there would be a sequel to this game a year later, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So here we are finally at the end of the marathon of Assassin's Creed. The end as of 2019, because of course the series is going to continue. But the end of my odyssey of playing all these games back to back to back to back to back to back and reviewing them is over with the perfectly titled Assassin's Creed Odyssey, released in 2018. It was actually released to a decent amount of praise and was even nominated for Game of the Year. But let's see if all that hype really is there for the game. So Assassin's Creed Odyssey has really only one storyline. There is the modern day portion, but this is even worse than the last game. Like, we are talking under 30 minutes, maybe even under 15 minutes. It basically isn't there. So the real story takes place even before Origins, and is actually set in 431 BC. It takes place around Greece during the Peloponnesian War, where Sparta and Athens were at each other's throats. The main storyline lets you pick between two characters, Alexios or Cassandra. I chose Cassandra. The main storyline starts with the player as a kid and watches their sibling get thrown off the cliff, allegedly for the good of Sparta, only to be thrown off the cliff themselves. The player leaves and ends up on an island and is greeted by Marcos, a merchant who raises the player. Many years later, the player is now a full-blown mercenary. The player then finally leaves the island to go find and fix their family. There is also this secret cult that seems to be trying to control the world and actually have your sibling and have brainwashed them to work for them. They are basically the original Templar Order. That is the gist of the main storyline. There are a few other plot points and other threads in the story that I'm not going to go into for spoilers, especially as the game is still relatively new. Let me just say that the story of this game is just alright. I'll be honest, I was not the biggest fan of this story. I don't think it was bad, but I just was not huge on it. I think it was just alright, and I actually think that Origins had the better story. The main character I feel is good, but nowhere near as good as some of the other main characters in the series. Even Bayek from Origins was better, I thought. There is some personality occasionally, but a lot of the time there just isn't that much, or at least not enough to keep me fully invested. That might be because there is the choice between two different players and like each one was just less developed, I guess, because of that. The cult was easily the best part of the story, and anything related to the mythical creatures. Those were the two best parts. They were generally mysterious and actually had some intrigue. They were cool, and anything involving them was quite good, I thought. The whole family getting back together thing, I was just like, it's okay. My biggest issue is that the story just takes so long to go anywhere, and then when it finally starts to go somewhere, it just takes an incredibly long time to get there. For instance, the beginning is extremely slow, and yeah, that could be expected. It's the beginning. Of course it's going to be slow, but the first like 5 to 10 hours has very little plot development outside of that first 25 to 30 minutes I mentioned. And then once it starts going, it takes a really long time to actually get there and make a huge plot development. And then finally at the climax near the end of the game, some nice plot twists happen in the game that gets the game actually more interesting with the story, but it takes such a long time to get there. Like a really long time. It just took way too long in my opinion to get really interesting. The introduction of the cult is finally when the story gets more interesting, but that is probably around 5 to 10 hours later, like I said. At least the ending to the game is fine, but it is dependent on your choices, which I will bring up later. There is also a secret ending that requires a decent amount of extra work that is really cool, I will say. In conclusion, the story could have been better, but it's certainly not bad. So now it is time to bring up the gameplay. The gameplay of Assassin's Creed Odyssey is very different from the previous games in the series, and is even decently different from Origins. Upon first glance, it may seem very similar to Origins, but I can assure you there's many differences, and this is not a been there done that situation. This game is pretty different from the other games in the series. The game is of course still in third person, is still an open world, but it is much more of an RPG than the previous games. There are many RPG elements in the game that were not present in Origins. Before we get to some of the differences, let's talk about the player character themselves and establish what they can do. This is the only Assassin's Creed to not feature a hidden blade, or at least in the base game there's no hidden blade. Your character moves similarly to Bayek. There is no run button, only a contextual sensitive movement button where your character will climb or mantle or jump automatically. There is also a climb down button, same as last time. The parkour is very streamlined and toned down. In fact, it's more toned down than it even is in Origins. You can also crouch and enter stealth mode with it. You can hide in bushes, hay, etc. Your eagle function returns, which is exactly the same as it was in Origins, telling you points of interest, where mission objectives are, where some enemies are, etc. In fact, let's talk about that for a minute. The navigation. It takes a similar path to Origins, but is a bit more expanded. The minimap is still gone. You have a compass like Skyrim with your points of interest. You also have the map to look at, the entire map. The map in this game is absolutely massive. Like, we're talking ginormous. It is ludicrously large, being much bigger than Origins, with a lot more locations and points of interest. There is so much to explore and find in this world that it would take you an eternity to explore it all. Returning are the question marks that are points of interest, just like how Witcher 3 does it. Also, when given a quest objective, you're not told exactly where it is, but the general area, like the northern part of a region. You can turn this off and actually have it tell you where exactly it is, but I really like the feature of them just telling you the area it is, because it encourages more exploration. Exploring the map is a huge part of the game. In fact, I would argue it's probably the main focus of the game. Once you uncover an enemy camp or fort or base or anywhere that's hostile, you start undetected, of course. The stealth system is the same as Far Cry's, with the cones for detection. If you're kind of spotted, but not fully, the guard will go check out where they think they saw you. Stealth kills are not a one-shot kill in this game, not by a long shot. You'll have to use a critical stealth attack to one-shot someone, usually, which uses up adrenaline, which I'll talk about in a minute. The stealth is fine. It really is not like amazing, but it is fine. It's functional, and at the very least it's consistent, so that's always good. It's what you would expect, honestly, from a modern day AAA developer stealth system, really. But eventually you're going to get spotted in this game, and that's when you go into combat. The combat is the same as Origins, but with a few twists. You still use the triggers and have a heavy and light attack. You also have a bow and arrow. However, all the cool ammo types are totally gone, and different bows are totally gone. It's just one type of bow and like 2 ammo types. Shields are completely gone. You cannot block anymore, which was something that I never even did in Origins. You roll everywhere, which is, I think, honestly the better change, since again that's what I did in Origins anyway. When you dodge an attack at the perfect time, You go into Witch Time, or no, not Witch Time, Breath of the Wild, Slow Time, no, not that one either. You just go into slow-mo, and everyone around you moves in slow-mo for a few seconds, which is very useful. Now, when you dodge attacks and land attacks, you fill up the adrenaline meter. This was in Origins, but it was very basic. It was limited to, like, basically just a super move. Or if you had a sword/scythe, you could go into, like, I guess like a super fast attack mode. But here, very different. Throughout the game, you acquire new combat skills, and these are using by adrenaline. For instance, a critical stealth attack, which usually can one-shot someone, it uses an adrenaline bar. And the only way to get more adrenaline is by attacking people or dodging at the right time. Other attacks include this amazing Sparta kick, a trip attack, a huge combo that just breaks through shields, or even lighting your sword on fire. Even the bow gets some explosive arrow with adrenaline. Even shooting enemies through walls with arrows. It's pretty cool stuff, but they all use this adrenaline meter, so this adrenaline meter is essential to gameplay, and really, you'll be just trying to build it up as fast as you can to use one of these super moves. And of course the super moves do have a cooldown. You can't just spam them even if you had enough adrenaline. The combat is much more expanded on than Origins, and I have to say, it is a lot more free-flowing and all around better. The amount of options you have is quite nice, and it just feels a lot better. Getting rid of the shield was actually much better, as it allows you to just roll more. The adrenaline moves really make up a bulk of the combat though, and you'll just be trying to get as fast as you can to just totally nuke these enemies with it, as some of these enemies have quite large health bars, and only these adrenaline moves will do a ton of damage to them. Now, on top of the detection system, there is another system in the game known as the mercenary system. The detection system runs off a basic break line of sight and hide for a tiny bit to go back into stealth mode. It's the same as it was in the last like half a dozen Assassin's Creed games. That entire break line of sight thing is pretty basic. The mercenary system is actually an expansion on the mercenary system from Black Flag, where doing bad actions such as killing people, burning war supplies, and stealing will cause mercenaries to come after you because a bounty will be placed on you. There are 5 levels of bounty hunters coming after you, each one more powerful than the last. Now, these bounty hunters do not give up easily. They follow you to the ends of the earth and are actually able to keep up with you quite easily. They're pretty ruthless overall and actually take a lot of punishment as well. They do not die easy in this game. This is the real detection system in the game, is hiding from the mercenaries or of course fighting them, but they take a lot of punishment. I'm just going to say that right now. The game also does not have a respawn system actually. You just reload a save. So your notoriety stays. Even if they kill you, you just reload a save. You can pay them off, but this is incredibly expensive. And don't even think about trying to get on your ship and escaping. No, they get on the ships and they will follow you and track you down. They do not give up. Oh yes, the ship combat returns and the ship exploration, I guess. Because the map is so large, there's actually a ton to explore with your ship. You can go pretty much anywhere with this ship, and it's pretty nice actually. The combat also returns, which is the same as Origins, but of course is a lot more free-flowing and just generally open, since it's not limited to these borderline scripted sequences like it was in Origins. You can shoot arrows, throw javelins, and of course ram into ships, which feels awesome. You can still board them after they're sinking, or just ram into them and annihilate them. Now eventually, after killing all these people and destroying ships and completing tasks, and doing pretty much anything in this game, I might add, you get experience like any other RPG. With this experience, you naturally level up. When you level up, you get a skill point. The skill tree is completely different from Origins. It's now Hunter, Assassin, and Warrior trees, with each tree having completely different skills. Some of them simply is just raising how much damage you do, while others give you new skills that you can use in battle with your adrenaline, like lighting your sword on fire, shooting through walls, etc. These are even more essential to the game than the previous one, and you're not going to get far in this game without certain skills. Like, there's just certain skills you're going to absolutely need. Each skill can be leveled up even up to 3 times for a greater effect, and you will not get enough skill points in this game to get every ability and level everything up. So you gotta pick and choose like an actual RPG. It is a real RPG element. Let's talk about those new RPG elements. For instance, being able to choose between 2 characters is pretty role-playing, I think. There is the introduction of dialogue options like I mentioned earlier, and while they are not the most amazing or different dialogue options, they don't actually mean too much in the grand scheme of things, but they are here. There are actually multiple endings in the game that are based off of some of the choices you make in this game, so the endings are different, but they're not too different in all honesty. There is branching quests based off of certain choices in the quest, such as assisting someone that you were going to maybe kill, or just asking for money instead of killing them. In fact, let's go more into the quest system of the game. Now, the quests in Origins were pretty basic in structure. It was just like, go get this thing for someone, kill someone, track someone, etc. And to an extent, it is just like that here, but on a much grander scale. With the choices you can make, some of these quests can totally change. Like I previously mentioned, you're only given a general location of the quest objective, and you actually have to go find it on your map. These make the quests a lot more free and just generally open with a little choice in them. It's a good thing that they are this open because there are literally hundreds of quests in this game, like actually hundreds. There is of course the main missions, but there is side missions as well. However, now there are daily bounties and daily missions that just change every day. In Origins there was only one daily mission, like for the entire day, and it was very small, and it wasn't even like a quest really. It was just like bring a certain item to the merchant. Here there are multiple daily quests and even weekly quests. It's just more online focused. There are just a lot more quests, and technically there is an infinite number of quests because of this. But it's good to know that they're not all identical, in theory. Now, besides the quests, there is of course exploring the world. Like I mentioned, the world is huge with tons to do in it. These include raiding forts, enemy camps, hunter bases, etc. You can explore tombs, get treasure, search wrecked ships for treasure, or steal it from a general's house. There are many treasure locations and enemy camps in this game. There's legendary animals to hunt. Again, there are cultists to kill based on finding clues about their identity, and even large-scale battles to partake in. There is actually like just too much content in this game, to be honest. There is so much to do, and I'll get into that in a bit. The loot gear system from Origins returns, but is much larger and more like a real loot system. You get weapons, bows, headgear, footwear, breastplates, and more armor. There is so much loot in this game that it's just kind of out of control. A lot of it is decent, but there is a crazy, and I mean crazy amount of loot in this game. It is extremely in-depth. There's even like a weight limit. Like, what? However, you can break stuff down to get crafting materials. Yes, crafting materials are here again, and it's pretty general. It's like cloth, rock, wood, etc. Use these to upgrade weapons, create weapons, or upgrade your ship. You can upgrade the ship pretty extensively again, and I gotta say, this is fun. The crafting and gear in the game is really in-depth, and is honestly what you would find in like Diablo. It's very grand. In fact, if I could describe the gameplay in one word, it would be grindy. I mean grandy. Grander, yeah, that's what it was. It is much larger than anything previously seen in the series, even Origins, and is just gargantuan. Something though that isn't a huge improvement, I will say, is the graphics. They look pretty great, but are not a massive leap from Origins. The game looks really good, of course. The textures, environments, and lighting, of course, it's all pretty superb for the most part. It looks just really good. There's no complaints here with any of that. It just kind of looks like your typical AAA game, and it looks nice. The animation was all really good in the game and was stellar, and the facial animations were all pretty good for the most part. The models were also really good, especially the ones based off of real life people. They all look great. The frame rate was a bit inconsistent, but I think it's due to the optimization of the game. I was able to get the game running on like medium to high for the most part on my computer, and I got a pretty inconsistent frame rate, honestly, especially when I was recording. It wasn't really that big of a deal, but I really wish it would be more consistent. Like when a ton of enemies are on screen, or like there's a bunch of fire, it just really wasn't all that consistent. The performance in general was not amazing, that's for sure, and I did get a bit of screen tearing again, but that not too much at least. The sound of the game was actually pretty good. A majority of the sound effects, I will say, are reused, and they're fine. I don't have any issues with that. They're at least serviceable, that's for sure. Like, that's at the very least, they're serviceable. Something I can say is that is a nice improvement over Origins is the music. there is actually music. In Origins, there is next to no music in the game, and it was really frustrating because you're in this big open world with exploration, and there's like no music at all, or it sucks. That's not the case here. There's tons of music in Odyssey, like everywhere. It's nice. Is it any good though? No, not really. In fact, I would say pretty much all of it is just generic crap, except for the main theme. That's really good. The main theme's really good. The only reason I remember any of the music in this game is because these tracks play over and over and over to the point where it's ingrained in your head. And it's really just that it's at its very, very best okay music, and at the worst it's just generic stock music. But I will give credit where credit is due. There is at least music. I mean, Origins didn't even have that, for the most part. The voice acting was pretty good. The accents were really on point here for the most part. It seems like everyone tried at least. The main character definitely has the best voice acting, and a couple of the other main characters are pretty alright, but a majority of the side characters are literally just throwaway, nothing really exciting. Like, it'd be like explaining a plank of wood if I went into depth of why the side characters are not the best voice acting wise. I mean, it's not bad, it's just kind of generic. The writing is again really just strange, as it uses modern terms that would never be used back then, like humankind. It was clearly written in modern day and has a lot of modern day terms in the writing again. But, I mean, to be fair, they probably wouldn't be speaking English in this time period anyway, so I'm not going to falter too much on that. I'm not going to be too in deep depth on that. Again, it's just weird. In general, the sound was pretty standard for a AAA game like this, nothing absolutely amazing, but it wasn't bad, that's for sure, except some of the music. Now, it's time for a big part of the review now to go over the stuff I think that is bad with this game. Now, Odyssey might be this huge adventure with a bazillion things to do and literally like infinite quests, but this game has some serious issues with it. While it does fix some things from Origins, it makes new issues actually. First off, the parkour / climbing in this game is not perfect. It can be quite finicky at times, and while it controls well enough, it's just not as good as it was in Origins, and other people have complained that the parkour mechanics are just generally okay, when at this point in time in Assassin's Creed they really should be better. But I guess that can be ignored for the most part, honestly. The horse you have in the game isn't the smartest, sometimes getting stuck on stuff, and has a hard time going up mountains. You of course summon it, just like pretty much Red Dead Redemption, but it's kind of not as smart or good. Mercenaries in this game can feel a bit overpowered at times, as they show up literally out of nowhere just to mess you up. Certain weapons enemies have, such as spears, can be extremely finicky, and you can take extra damage from them when you shouldn't have. Now, those few I just mentioned, they could honestly be considered minor gripes with the game. They're borderline nitpicks, nothing large or even new to Assassin's Creed really. But besides that, there's really only one issue with the game. But this issue is huge, and it extends to other parts of the game. The game is grindy. This game is extremely bloated. This game is too big and too grand for its own good. The game is repetitive, can be borderline mind-numbing even. There's nothing wrong with a long game. There's nothing wrong with a grand game. It's when it's grindy or a long game feels really long and does not keep me engaged, that's when it's a problem. And in many cases, when the game is larger or just really grand like this, it does not feel grindy, or at least it doesn't make it this obvious for the most part in most games. But this game is not that. It is very obviously grindy for the sake of being grindy. It is shockingly obvious. Where to even begin with this one? So you need XP to level up, obviously. Now if you fight someone who is even 3 levels above you in this game, since all the enemies have levels like in Origins, you won't do much damage to them, like at all. I'm not even kidding. You'll do like piss poor damage. So you need to get to their level to fight them. Makes sense, that's how Origins did it. Origins though did not have a ridiculous amount of XP you need to level up though. Some of the mainline quests that are required to progress the story will be 3 or 4 levels higher than the previous main quest. Doesn't sound like that big of a deal. Origins did this twice in the game actually, near the beginning and the end. Yeah, well, Origins did not make you need a ridiculous amount of XP to level up though. This starts even at the very beginning of the game. You almost right off the bat are not a high enough level for the next main mission. So what do you have to do? You have to go grind and level up, because if you're not a high enough level, you're not going to be able to do any damage to the enemies. But like I have said, the amount of XP you need in this game is crazy. Like literally from the start, it is crazy. Here is a perfect example of how crazy it is. Around level 39 in the game, and by the way, the max level is 50, at least the base is 50. You need 112,000 XP to level up to level 40 from level 39. 112,000. So I just finished a main quest in the game. How much XP did I get? Try 22,000. 22,000 for a main quest. Okay, well how about a side mission then? 18,000. Yeah, 18,000. So let me do an entire side quest line, like 4 side quests for one character. Maybe it's Socrates or some other Greek figure. You do some side missions in the game for them. 25,000 for finishing the freaking quest line. That is of course including the previous mission XP rewards. Okay, well maybe I don't want to do some quests. Maybe I just want to go hunt the cultists actually. I got some clues. I got a couple of them. Maybe I'll go hunt one. I just killed a cultist. 3,000 XP. Okay, well, that's not too much. How about I explore the map? Yeah, that'll be fun. I'll explore the map. Explore this world, clear out some camps, steal some treasure, and reach some high points, watch the stupid eagle fly around. I just explored this new area. 400 XP. Okay, I just cleared out this enemy camp. 2,000 XP. I got the treasure in the tomb. 2,600 XP. I just synchronized and watched the stupid eagle. 500 XP. Okay then, how about this? I just cleared out an enemy fort. It took me like 20 minutes. 18,000 XP. Okay then, I just killed 3 really tough mercenaries. 1,800 XP. Man, it's really hard to level up in this game when you have to do so much. If only there was a way I could just get more XP from this. It's like I'm only getting a couple thousand XP from these tasks when I need 112,000 XP. Oh wait, there is. I can just buy a booster with real money. Yeah, then I get double, maybe even triple XP from everything in the game for only like $5 in real life. Do you understand what I'm saying now? This game is ridiculously grindy, and it is really obvious about it. It is insultingly obvious how grindy it is and extremely reliant it is on it. It is as predatorial as it gets, and this is like the worst microtransactions I have ever seen in a single player game. This used to belong to Middle-earth Shadow of War, but they actually pulled the microtransactions from the game, so now it's easily this. And yes, Origins did have this as well, but I didn't even bring it up because it was never like this in Origins. It was never this bad. You got plenty of XP from everything, and it never felt grindy in the game, except for maybe the end when it got a bit repetitive. It was nowhere near as bad, and it just seems like it was just shoved in there at the last second in Origins, honestly. Like, they just were like, let's just throw it in there at the last second. But they took this idea and just decided to make the game way too big for its own good to incentivize you buying these boosters. It is a sick joke, and I think it's disgusting that Ubisoft is even doing this. I should not have to do upwards of 6 or 7 side quests that take around 20 minutes each to complete, like to level up once. Sure, if these were easy little fetch quests, I could see doing a bunch to level up, but that's not the case. These are full-blown side missions, and they just do not give you enough XP, main missions included. And then doing anything else in this game that isn't a mission, like a side mission or main mission or quest or whatever, it's just not even worth it. It's an insulting amount of XP. They literally do not even give you a tenth of the XP needed. Really, I just explored this entire new area. I even synchronized with the high point, watched the stupid eagle fly around, and you give me maybe 1,000 XP when I need 100,000 at least to level up? Like, are you kidding me? And again, you can't just ignore these levels, and like, you can't ignore them at all. Like, if you do not do this XP grind, if you're not within 2 levels of the enemy, you will get destroyed by them. No matter the difficulty, you just won't do any damage. Well, the example I gave was a bit later game, but I can assure you that this is like the entire game. Like, for instance, at level 10, you'll need around 50,000 XP to level up, and a main mission will give you like 6,000 or 7,000 XP. It's a joke. It is literally the entire game from the first hour that it's like this. On the first island, I was exploring a new area, the very first island, and I was like, I only got like 300 XP from exploring this new area. I need like 3,000 or 4,000 XP to level up. I guess I'll stick to the quests. And yeah, you should stick to the quest for XP, because that's the best way to get XP in the game. But this leads me into my next part of this issue. The quests in this game get incredibly repetitive. Like, it is ridiculous how fast they get repetitive. Even with the choices, the RPG elements, the quests get old really fast. A majority of them have you going from point A to point B on the map, clearing out an area, picking up some items for some NPC. Like, if you've already cleared out the area, then you literally just go into the empty area and grab the item and leave. Like, it's really almost always that, is go to an area, kill everyone there, get an item, leave. And if it's a person you're killing instead, then that person will usually just be with guards. This is almost every side mission in the game. And while this was the case in Origins, they didn't have you do even half as many that this game has you do. Like, this game has dozens upon dozens upon dozens of side quests that are literally just go to this area, kill these people, take this item, bring it back. That is actually almost every side quest in the game. Additionally, the main missions, they honestly don't even feel any different from the side missions. They're just as generic and similar to the side quests. That is not every main quest, I assure you, but there are a number of good ones, really, that they just don't feel any different from the side quests, and a lot of them just feel like the side quests. In fact, I was getting confused whether some of these main missions are side quests. This also makes me question the term side quest. How much of it is a side quest when you literally have to do it because you don't have anywhere near enough XP from anything else? This isn't a side quest. This is not optional. It's optional in the sense that you can choose some side quests over others, but you're gonna have to do the side quests. And like I mentioned, they get old, like really old, really fast. Like, they just feel incredibly repetitive, and by the end you just see the formula on full display. Ubisoft has always loved to just cram the world full of these little activities that are generally repetitive, or collectibles that are again generally repetitive, but they never really force them onto you, or if they did, it was very minimally. They didn't force you to do a ton of side stuff. You could just go through the game normally. That is not the case here. You cannot do that. You have to do a lot of the side stuff to get anywhere in this game. And I brought this up probably 10 games now. For like, seriously, like 10 games now I brought this up. But a lot of the side content in Assassin's Creed is just not good or interesting, and it continues here. There are some good side missions. I will give them some credit. There are some good ones here. But I just feel that it's like for every good side quest that's in Odyssey, there's like 3 or 4 or even 5 boring ones. If I had to describe the quests in Odyssey, it would be one word. It would be subpar. Because that's what they are. They're just subpar. They aren't the most fun. They are certainly not engaging, and do very little to distinguish themselves apart. Now, I've gone this far, and I've only mentioned The Witcher 3 once. But it's time for the comparison, because even Ubisoft admitted that was the main inspiration for the game. In Witcher 3, every quest was unique and awesome. Even the most basic of quests always had usually an interesting turn or twist and never felt the same. That is just not the case here, and this game pales in comparison to Witcher 3. Witcher 3 quests are leagues better than this, like way better than Odyssey, and I don't think you'll honestly find anybody who thinks otherwise. The infinite quests like the dailies and bounties are just the most generic, repetitive missions imaginable, and I did one, and I decided to never do another one because I was just disgusted with how benign it was. Because of how strenuous and bloated this game is, it just takes a long ass time to do anything in this game, because it takes a long ass time to level up, and it feels like it takes a long ass time to complete missions. And this game just takes a long ass time to beat because of it. And like I said, I don't have any problems against long games. I don't have any problems with really long games. I have problems with really long games that are extremely repetitive and shouldn't be this long, which is this game. It just felt incredibly repetitive, almost right off the bat. To be fair, this is someone who is not only coming off of Origins almost immediately, but this is someone who played through the entire franchise of Assassin's Creed within the span of 2 months. So to say I was a little burnt out would probably be fair, but it just felt grindy right off the bat, and by the end of the game, it was just testing my patience. And that is why I did not go for the secret ending, because I would have to level up like 8 times to get to the final secret boss, to get to the secret ending, and I was just so not in the mood. I was super done with this game. Luckily, there is XP glitches that have been discovered to give you tons upon tons upon tons of XP relatively easy, so you can just look that up on YouTube. But you really shouldn't have to be doing this in this kind of game. There is no reason you should have to do this, but this game is just so strenuous, giving you only tiny amounts of XP, so you either have to complete tons upon tons of missions and explore literally dozens, hundreds of areas, or you buy their booster to give you more XP for the stuff you do. And a lot of these activities you do or places you explore are just incredibly similar or feel very samey. A big part of this comes down to the type of gamer you are. If you're able to put up with the meager amount of XP and tons of activities you have to do in this game and don't care that it can feel repetitive and you just love how much there is, you're going to love this game. You'll love how much there is to do, how you can spend like 100 hours on it and explore everything in the game. But if you're someone who's looking for a ton of engaging content that's all different or at least slightly different, you really are not going to find much of it here. You're going to find mostly a slog of a game where you need to get tons of XP to progress, and you'll have this feeling of being held back because you need to be a higher level, and you'll feel held back because of doing these borderline repetitive tasks to get there. I'll be honest, if this was the first Assassin's Creed game I had played in years, I'd probably be more than okay with it, and I could see the whole kind of repetitive, grindy issue being much less of an issue than it is. But coming off basically 11 games now, I'm done with this. Now, another interesting point that I don't like about this whole leveling system that was not in Origins is that everything scales with you. Basically, everything in the game in terms of level actually does scale with you or is above you. For instance, the first island in the game is level 1 to 5. Of course, it's going to be like level 1 because you're level 1. You start here. But if you come back at level 35 to this original island, everything is going to be level like 33 to 36. Like, why does everything scale with you? This is terrible scaling. I get that it exists so that you can complete quests at any time to get XP, but no, this is a fundamental aspect of RPGs that they're throwing by the wayside. In RPGs, you start out weak as hell and struggle with the enemies in early areas. Then you come back later and kick their ass, no problem, but not here. The enemies give you some trouble at the start of the game. You come back 30 hours later, oh yeah, they're still going to give you trouble. Like, this is just not good game design to me. It's like they'll forever be giving me trouble. Literally, once you're max level, they'll be max level too. Origins didn't do this at all. Every area had a level cap. For instance, starting level was level 1 to 5, and if you came back way later, around level 30, everything was still level 1 to 5, and you would wipe the floor with them. That's how it's supposed to be. Your character grows, and you become a badass mercenary. Odyssey does not have this. Not even the bounty hunters in early areas stay a similar level. They also level up and scale with you. It's just really frustrating. The entire leveling up, XP related stuff, doing tons of quests, like system in place is my real issue with the game. It's a massive issue. I've been talking about it for over 10 minutes now because it's such a giant issue. And I think it's not only insulting to consumers to do this and be so blatant and obvious about it, but the game can just come off as boring sometimes because of it. Constantly grinding to get to the next level, to do the next main mission. Like, that feels incredibly similar to the dozen other missions you've done. Like, the main mission won't even feel satisfying or different. Like, no, I can't recommend that in good faith. I can only recommend this game on a case-by-case basis. It depends on the kind of gamer you are more here than ever. I don't care that you can have sex with almost every NPC in the game, because these scenes suck. They're not even sex scenes. Like, come on. I will give credit where credit is due. The gameplay is very good in the game. I really think that exploring, clearing out fortresses, being stealthy, the combat, getting awesome loot, killing the cultists, doing these sweet adrenaline moves, it's all very good, and I will admit it can be a bit addictive. there is a bit of a gameplay hook to just explore that one more area or just kill that one more cultist before you go to bed and it's 3:30 a.m. It can be addictive and it can be good. The gameplay is certainly better than Origins. I legitimately think the gameplay on its own is better than Origins. I will give it that, but anything related to the leveling up, the XP, the grindy factor, any of the RPG stuff, it just makes me like Origins more. All in all, I think Origins is the better game because of it. When this game just starts to feel a bit repetitive, like when Origins started to feel a bit repetitive, the game ended. This game, no, it doesn't end. It's the longest Assassin's Creed by far, taking me around 41 hours to beat the game, but I could have easily doubled my time here, and I'd add just another 10 hours at least just to get the secret ending. No thanks, I'm not interested in that long of a grindy ass game. Anyway, that is the end for Assassin's Creed for now. I can't or can recommend it to people because, like I said, like, it's a case by case basis. It depends on you as a gamer. Like, all I can say is that it's already hitting serious price drops, so the game isn't even expensive, and regardless of everything, you totally get your money's worth with this game. And additionally, there is a ton of DLC for this game, but I am so done with this game. I don't need any more of it. I am not interested in a live service kind of game or whatever this game is selling itself as. In fact, I don't even want to play any more Assassin's Creed for years and years. I am just so done with the series now. It took me like 8 or 9 years to catch up, but I'm finally caught up now, and I can stop now. In the end, it's a pretty good series, of course, but I am just so done with playing these games. I've played them all now. I can tell you all of them, best to worst. It's maybe for another video, depending if you want to see it, but I am done. So, with that said, everyone, have a fantastic night. This is the longest video review I've ever done, but I had so much to talk about with this game. It is really long. And, oh snap, this is hella long. But, follow the Twitter, the YouTube, sub, comment, like, tell me what is your favorite Assassin's Creed, and why isn't it this game? I can tell you why, it's because it's grindy. But, with that said, have a great Christmas, everyone.